quick. Thanks everyone and welcome to the November 10th, 2021 meeting of the Midcoast Community Council. Dave, would you please call the roll?
Dan?
Yes, here.
Lynn?
Here.
Claire?
Here.
Jill?
Here.
Greg?
Who are you people and how did you get on my computer?
And I will take that as a present. Michelle?
Here.
And I am also here, all present.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is the resolution to continue remote meetings. This is the same resolution text that we adopted at the first meeting in October, and we will continue to adopt this or vote on this every month or every 30 days. So typically the first meeting of the month, as long as we would like to continue to do online meetings. It basically says that we feel that having in-person meetings would be a risk to the health and safety of attendees. And so I will ask if any council members would like to comment. Any members of the public would like to comment on this?
I would, but I can't find the raise hand thing.
Okay, go ahead, Sid.
I was just going to say that I would really hope that we would be allowed to keep having it. And until we get a nice meeting room in a community center or something, I really don't like meeting in the sanitary district third floor office. So I hope we can keep doing it via Zoom.
Yes, and even if we do decide to go back to in-person meetings, we would try to do it in a hybrid format that would allow attendees to come in to virtually.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this before we take a vote? Okay, Dave, please call the roll for a vote to approve resolution 2020. Oh, there was a typo. It should have said 2021-02. Sorry about that, to continue the remote meetings.
I guess he doesn't want to do it because he's remote.
I think he's on mute.
Sorry, I was waiting to hear if somebody had made a motion.
Oh.
I move that we adopt a continuing resolution to continue remote meetings.
I second it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dan?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Claire?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
And I'm also yes, passes unanimously.
Great. Next, we'll go to the Board of Supervisors report, and we have Lena Silberman here, I believe, from County Supervisor Horse's office to give that report. Go ahead, Lena.
Thank you. So I'm going to try and go pretty quick because I do have a couple things. I did want to let everyone know that I was alerted by a council member that the San Mateo County alert system just hasn't really been activated for incidences within the Midcoast as much as it really should be. And so I've been doing some research. I've been contacting the sheriff's office and CHP and Coastside Fire to really see when and how they activate and how we can make that better. But no real update just yet. Just want to let you know that I'm following up on that. There was a couple of really good questions that I was asked at the last meeting, and I really wanted to have answers ready. They were regarding Peninsula Clean Energy and then some of the electrification situations. I just haven't gotten the answers to those questions yet, but I haven't forgotten, and I will get those to you. Some good news. I had reported about the county coordinator grant in the past, which is a fire resiliency related grant of up to $175,000 for basically administrative costs related to fuel reduction. And we've gotten that grant. I believe we've gotten the complete $175,000. So we're just waiting for it to activate. And I will keep you updated on how that's going to affect the Midcoast, hopefully in really good ways. And so then I just want to say a little bit about the Coastside Recovery Initiative. I was lucky enough to sit in with the supervisor to be presented with the final recommendations. I'm really excited about it, and Harvey may talk about it later, but there will be a presentation at a Half Moon Bay City Council meeting on November 16th. And I'll include the link information for that. A quick plug for the Choose Local San Mateo County app. I have not tried it yet, but I'm really excited. It basically helps local businesses get hooked up with us, and so it's easier to find where things we might look for are. So I'll put some information about this app, and I'm really excited to try it out, and hopefully we can support some local businesses through that. For redistricting, yesterday, the Board of Supervisors received a report about the supervisorial districts and the 2 recommended maps. They had a public hearing and they created a subcommittee, which consists of the president of the board and the vice president, so Supervisors Canepa and Horsley, to review those 2 maps, 4 additional maps that weren't voted on by the council, as well as the minimal change map. And that'll be presented at the next board meeting, which is actually next week. So I'll have some information about that. The Board of Supervisors also voted yesterday 4-1 to authorize the beginning of the off-leash dog recreation pilot program. It's kind of a technical program with a lot of different facets, so I'll include a link to some more information on that. And then I realized I didn't capitalize this, but the county sheriff announced that he, effective immediately, will no longer be responding to requests from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is ICE, for inmate release. And so just want to let you know about that. And then lastly, my COVID update, lots of interesting stuff going on. We've seen a lot of participation from people who are between 5 and 11 years old. So thank you to those people and to their parents for getting them out to get vaccinated. Hopefully soon our data dashboards will have a little section for that age group. And you know, I'm not going to go over the specifics of our case rates because they're about the same as last week, although they are a little bit better, and we are now back into that yellow tier. So just, they're still trying to track. We know that there's a chance of another surge with the holidays. So we're looking good for now, but we want to keep a hold of that, and I'll keep you updated. And then I will put some more information with some of the upcoming vaccination and booster vaccination events coming up. And that is all my updates, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you, Lena. I'll go to anyone who has questions. I see first Sid Young has her hand raised.
Hi, Lena. I think I just not sure if it's a question, but you didn't mention that it sounded like during the public comment on the dog thing, off-leash dog pilot program, that Committee for Green Foothills and also the Sierra Club both spoke out in opposition. And it sounded like since the county did approve it, that they might be suing them or shall I say, appealing it to the Coastal Commission. I wouldn't mind if they just put the pilot program in Quarry Park myself, but I know that a lot of the dog walkers who have behaved dogs are in favor of it. It's just, unfortunately, so many people that go up there don't follow the rules. Not everybody, but a lot. So anyway, and then the other thing I just wanted to clarify, when is the final day? Did they really decide whether what the final day is going to be for the supervisory lines adjustments? So, I know they have to get it by December 15th to the county, to the state, but.
Right. So that's exactly right. My guess, I can't tell you for sure, is that they won't want to be doing it on the December 14th board meeting. That's just a little bit too close of a call. Mm-hmm. Going to want it resolved by that first board meeting the week before in December. So it could be next week. I'm kind of thinking it's probably going to be the December thing, the first week in December, but I'm not 100% sure. It could even.
It was pretty vague. I just wondered if you had more clarification. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will comment that I did receive. So we did send if you'll remember, the MCC voted on a letter to the redistricting committee back in October, first meeting in October. And I did forward that to the supervisors as was requested by some council members off in between meetings. And I did get a response from Supervisor Horsley that said that they would be talking about it at a couple of the upcoming meetings. So it sounds like it may be even discussed in multiple meetings.
It was surprising how many people, even from Menlo Park and Palo Alto, that one of the maps wants to merge with the coast, they were against it too. And I personally think it's too much geography for one supervisor, but that's just me. Anyway.
Okay, thank you, Sid. I'll go next to Lisa Ketchum.
Oh, hi, I just had something to add about the off-leash dog pilot project. To clarify, the supervisors, their support of the pilot project does not go into effect yet. Their coastal development permit is required. This is considered a change in use or intensification. And so that the CDP will come to the Planning Commission, and that decision is appealable to the Coastal Commission. So this is, it seemed misleading in the press release that, like this is a done deal. You can start letting your dogs go off leash. That's not the case. That's all I just wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And maybe it was unclear in the press release. In the meeting minutes that they provide after, they did make it very clear that it's pending issuance of a coastal development permit. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yes, thanks, Lisa. Next, I'll go to Anne.
Hi, thank you. I had a quick question because I was attending the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday, and there was an item 49 on the agenda, and they went into closed session, so I don't know if they voted on it, but it was to approve $1.195 million using Measure A and W funds to initiate the project at Cypress Avenue and 16th Street in Moss Beach. They're going to start the study, and I don't know if they voted on that or what came of it because there was no public comment and they did not vote or online. So if you could please let me know.
Oh, sure. Great question. So items that are that far on the agenda are actually in the consent category. So they vote on the consent same as they do at the MCC. So that was approved. Unless someone pulls it from consent and then makes a decision, it would be approved.
But it's not Cypress Ave, it's the Cypress Point project that's at 16th Street. Because I live near Cypress Ave, it's not that one.
Well, yeah, but there's another Cypress. Cypress is also at 16th. There's 16th and Cypress. It's called Cypress. It's the little street where the project is. And this is specifically for the project.
Yeah,
but I was just concerned.
Carlos.
I'm so sorry, Carlos.
All good. It's a great question. And if they don't pull it from the consent agenda, you can assume that it got passed. So I'm sure that was, I don't know it specifically, but I know just because of the way that functions that must have been passed.
Okay, thank you.
May I just add to that item, or should I wait?
Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead.
Okay. I had an inquiry from someone else about what the item was. And basically, I think the council wrote a letter in support of a grant application. And that is what was approved to basically to submit the grant application and approve the matching funds, which is way less than the full amount. That full amount is not, that they mentioned in the staff report, is not coming out of the county budget. That's an application for a grant from the Transportation Authority. And the project, so since you know what you support, the MCC supported the grant application, you know that project is a PID it's for the corridor in Moss Beach.
Right.
And this has been talked about for a long time, and basically Caltrans said clearly that the next step, if you want to do anything with these intersections, is to do this study. And that's all that is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, next I'll go to Dan Haggerty.
Yes, thank you, Lena. And in regards to the El Granada Fire Station lighting, I was in communication with Summer Burleson, and she let us know that there was not an expert measurement of the light leaving the property. We know that the conditions of approval state that no light should be leaving the property. We know that light does leave the property, but we're still trying to determine how did staff determine that the conditions of approval were met. We believe that they used the photometric report, which was, I believe, published in 2018, well before the lights were ever turned on, as a measurement or as metric to determine that the lighting is fine. But I just want to let you know that we are waiting back from Summer for this information. I know that she's very busy, and I didn't want to, put too many follow-up emails asking for this. Give her a little time, but I just wanted to let you know as well. And so we're waiting for that information. Any help you can give us would be appreciated.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And if you want, feel free to CC me on those emails, and I can try and interface with Summer and bring it to priority.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions for Lena? I don't see any other hands raised anymore. All right. Thank you, Lena. We will move on. I believe we have Harvey Ryback here from the city of Half Moon Bay.
Indeed, you do. I have a few brief updates. Last night at the city council meeting in Half Moon Bay, we had over 100 people from the community talk about housing and the lack thereof and the importance thereof, and the fact that affordable housing, real affordable housing, is very, very difficult. I think everybody who lives on the coast side, whether it's Midcoast or the city, certainly aware of that. The upshot is that the council has made it very clear that one of their highest priorities is to actually build some affordable housing. It's easier said than done. I'm fully aware of that. The city owns a one-family house that's right next to Ted Adcock Center on Kelly Avenue, 555 Kelly. It was clear that we have to build something, whether it's affordable housing or housing for disabled adults. There was no conclusion. The only conclusion was that it's about time that that property be used. We would like to extend it onto the parking area nearby to make it a decent sized parcel. So that's one event that came out of the council meeting yesterday. The other more contentious issue has to do with another city-owned property that's at 888 Stone Pine Avenue. That's a 22-acre parcel that has the potential, and I emphasize potential, for building affordable housing on it. It has lots and lots of constraints, but the one thing that is going for it is the city does own it. And, in order to build affordable housing, you really need three things. You need land, you need money, and you need community buy-in. And this is at least the land. We're very far away from making any decisions. We want to work with nonprofit housing agencies like MidPenn, Mercy Housing. They've already come out and walked around some of the potential sites for affordable housing in the city. So this is the beginning of an ongoing process, but the difference is that it's now clear that the council is not going to brook any further delay in actually implementing affordable housing. So that was an interesting outcome. This is we've had a number of meetings starting in the spring where we've had people talk about 4 families living in a one-bedroom house, and it really is something that we have to do something about, and not just talk about it like we've been doing. So that was one of the outcomes of last night's meeting. The other things I wanted to report on are that the electrification draft ordinance is going to be brought up for a first reading on the November 16th meeting. That's very controversial. Lots and lots of misinformation has been published in the review. And Nextdoor has lots of misinformation also. But we also have some environmentalists who are trying to explain why we want to do it and how important it is for decarbonization and the health of the planet. So that ordinance is going to be considered November 16th. And if you're interested, please come virtually to the meeting. The other thing that came out of last night's meeting is that we are going to consider a resolution that would require anybody who works for the city or with the city or is a consultant, anybody doing that in city limits must be vaccinated. If this resolution passes, we will require that for all our contractors, employees, and that includes Sheriff's Department if this gets passed. So this is another controversial measure that the City Council is going to be considering in November 16th. The last item that's on my list is our redistricting for the City Council district. We have a slightly longer time that we have to get the maps approved. Right now, we're aiming for January 19th. The redistricting committee is going to meet again in this early December to refine probably 2 of their maps and present that to the City Council for a discussion. It's going to go back to the redistricting advisory committee and then come back for the final approval of the City Council. There are really 2 separate issues that the redistricting is going to involve. Not only do we need to know whether we're going to have 4 or 5 districts, but whether we're going to have an at-large elected mayor, and if so, is that position going to be a 2-year or a 4-year position? All of that is yet to be determined, and it'll be determined by the end of January. That's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Harvey. Lots to report there. I'll go to people who have their hands raised for questions, starting with Greg Diegues.
Harvey, you may remember last meeting I asked if you had a study on the overall benefits to the climate crisis of the electrification program. And I know you wrote me back acknowledging the request, but I haven't seen anything. I went to the Peninsula Clean Energy site. I attended a Rutgers seminar today on this issue. I won't go into all the details about Rutgers, but there's not a good story out there that I've seen. And so I would appreciate if you have, like I said, some evidence of the overall reduction in greenhouse gases and especially the net return over energy invested of the program. I'd love to see it.
Okay, I did send you an article from the Times that did talk about the benefits of electrification.
Must have been the wrong article because it was not on point.
Okay. I hope you seem to be conflating power reduction, which is a separate issue from greenhouse gas reduction, and I was confused a little bit about what you were really getting at. But I will be glad to do a little more research on the benefits for greenhouse gas reduction, which is what we're aiming for by doing building electrification.
Okay, especially if you're the environmentalists you have coming, maybe they have a study. You just mentioned you're going to have them come and speak.
Yeah. It's too complicated an issue to talk about briefly, but I will get back to you. This time I promise I will, in fact, send you something relevant.
Great, thank you. Next, I'll go to Sid Young.
Harvey, you said you were still under consideration over your redistricting and whether to have 4 council members or 5 and or a 4-year or whatever term mayor. And so my question is, if you only had 4 city council members, would the mayor be the tiebreaker vote, or would they get a equal vote on their, on the issues? And secondly, would that person term out, or they're up for continuous reelection as mayor, or how does that work?
State law says we need 5 city council people. So the mayor would be just one of 5. The difference is whether the mayor is elected at large from all the districts, okay?
Yeah.
And so the mayor has no tie-breaking privilege.
But so like they have to have 5 separate districts in Half Moon Bay, basically.
No, it can have 4 districts.
Okay, but it wouldn't leave whoever was the mayor unsupported, or shall we say unrepresented.
I don't follow.
You have 5 districts now, don't you?
No.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thanks. Thought you had 5 city council members.
It's confusing because we're transitioning. So in 2018, we went to 4 districts, but we've had 5 city council people. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then you guys, at this point, you had just been appointing your mayor from whoever won the most votes, or by popularity amongst the council members, or something like that, right?
It was more a rotation.
Got it.
Effectively rotated. That was a tradition that we've had.
So if they keep 5 districts and one person gets elected, would the person who got the most votes overall be the mayor, or would be separately voted on by all of the districts who would be mayor?
If we went to 5 districts, we would continue to have a rotating mayor.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Well, next I'll go to Anne.
Thank you. I just had a quick question, Harvey. Have you ever discussed, or the council discussed, 2 things? One, purchasing the hotels as you did for the homeless. Is there any way to convert that into affordable housing, so it would be a conversion rather than an entire build? Also, I grew up in New Jersey, and I lived in a poor neighborhood, but one thing they did that was really great is they took single family homes and split them in 2. And then a family would live on either side of a home, and you were able to actually purchase a home, but you were paying for half of a home. So it was half the price. And I don't know if that's a consideration you might want to have or think about, if there's any way for people on the coast who may want to downsize but have nowhere really to go. There may be a way to convert homes so that you have half of a home, and you can have some equity. That way you can at least sell half of a home and have 2 families live. It's just a thought. But I feel that one of the best ways to get people out of poverty is home ownership, because you have equity. And it's something that I personally believe in. And it worked for me and my family.
Great. Let me tackle the first comment you made. The city did not buy what is now called the Coast House, used to be the Coastside Inn. The county bought it. The city has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the county about how it's to be run. Initially, it's going to be and is a homeless shelter. It's going to have 52 rooms available for people experiencing homelessness. As part of the MOU, there is the potential that in a few years it might become affordable housing. Right now, the hotel rooms don't have kitchens. They have bathrooms as part of them. That helps. But if you really want to have people living in the units, most likely there would have to be a kitchenette added. So the county and the city are both aware of the fact that in the future, we might convert Coast House into affordable housing, which would be wonderful. The second item that you talked about splitting houses, there's actually a bill, SB 9, Senate Bill 9, which was approved and signed by the governor, which allows the division of houses into two different duplexes, which could also have, in addition, an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU. So in principle, you could convert a single family house into 4 living units. It's to be seen whether people are going to actually do that or not. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, so we'll move on. Thank you so much, Harvey.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other government officials who would like to speak at this time? Okay, I don't see any, so we will go to item 3 on the agenda, which is public comment on and announcements. This is comment on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you want to make a comment, please make sure it's not about Plastic-Free Future, Connect the Coastside, or the MCC website. I'll start with Sid.
Okay, 2 things. And I guess Lena's still on here with us, but I forgot to mention it while she was on. I happened to be talking to a CHP the same day that they'd had the Devil's Slide closed for yet again another cliff rescue. And there was no SMC alert that day to the Coastsiders. So I asked the CHP why we weren't getting them if the CHP doesn't coordinate with SMC Alert. And he told me that the CHP that responds to Devil's Slide is through San Francisco. So that might be part of the problem, but I'm sure there were some coastside sheriffs on scene there. They usually are. And I think it's just a lack of communication for the coastside because we are often the boonies and often forgotten. So that leads me to my second thought, and that is that I think it's really important to get in there with your opinions on which supervisory plan or new map you approve of. Personally, I don't want to be split apart from Pacifica because one of the maps want them to be putting Pacifica in with Daly City and Brisbane, which would be Supervisor Canepa, and then whoever succeeds him. And then Don Horsley's district or whoever succeeds him might be with Menlo Park and the rest of the coast exclusive of Pacifica. And I will say that Carol Broom brought up a really important opinion, and she's on the Coastal Commission, and she was against having Pacifica been split up from the coast because of Coastal Commission issues. So I personally don't want to be I guess I would say governed or represented by somebody who lives in Menlo Park or that far away, because already it's such a fast district for whatever supervisor gets it, but it's actually looks like it's made it bigger. And I know they have to do it by ethnic background and population and everything else. But if you look at the maps, I think the coast side was getting the bulk of the population anyway of the other districts. If you're of any opinion, you might want to send in your information in after you look at the map. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sid. Next, I'll go to Rick Lohman. Rick, go ahead. Oh yeah, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
I'll be speaking in direct opposition to my friend Sid there. The 2 key maps they're talking about is the Unity map and the Rudy Espinoza map. They have a lot in common. The common is that what we call the coast side is included, as is in both maps. The key differences between the maps is the largest unrepresented group and what they call communities of interest in the county is the unincorporated group. The point of the Rudy Espinoza map is to reach out and gather in more of the unincorporated people, including people who aren't in what we would call the coast side. Unincorporated people have no voice other than talking to a supervisor. All the people identified as communities of interest in the Unity map all live in cities. So they also have cities, and their map also splits 8 cities up, and the Rudy map only splits 1, and they've agreed it's okay. The other point of the difference in the 2 maps is specifically Pacifica. And the opinion of the Rudy map is that if we bring Pacifica, although it is a coastal city and has a Taco Bell and all that fun stuff, the main point is moving Pacifica into our district means that's as big as all the rest of all the representatives combined. So having Pacifica have a voice in the district would dominate the district completely. And that isn't just the unincorporated people. Half Moon Bay would be washed out also. So the point of the Espinoza map is to gather more of the unincorporated people who happen to live over the hills, some of them. But the commonality is we have no voice and we have no representation. We can't go to a city. So the point of that is to excluding Pacifica and giving us a more vote. So if we continue with the map that has Pacifica in it, Half Moon Bay loses, the unincorporated people lose, and it will be business as usual, which means they listen to everybody else and not us. If you'd like to discuss this, I don't want to have a big conversation here. My easiest email is rick@nwsd.net, or you can call me at 650-759-7969, and I'd be happy to discuss all those details offline. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Perfect timing. That was 3 minutes. And next I'll go to Graham Wood.
Unmute myself. We know that from the last meeting that the Panorama consultancy project has now started, and we know that our representatives are on that, I believe, are Michelle and Len. Will we be getting regular updates at the MCC meetings on what is happening with that project? And will we be told how the community can engage? We have, many people, we had 600 people signed a petition. Many of them would like to be engaged, I'm sure, in communication with the consultants? How do we go about making that happen, and when will that happen?
Thanks for that question, Graham. Yes, you're right. I'm actually the primary person on the committee that's going to be working with Panorama and reviewing the proposal. I'll say nothing has happened yet. The RCD was still working on finalizing the contract before we kick off any sort of conversations or meetings about that. As soon as we do have any updates to share, I will be bringing them to every MCC meeting. Also, as Sheena said at our last meeting, when we had Sheena and Kellex both here to speak, we will be having public comment be an important part of this. And I would say, like, initially, that wasn't part of the RFP to have an actual meeting where Panorama comes and engages directly with the community, but that's something I really pushed for in the meetings, and Panorama said that they would be open to. So going forward, I think we will have a special meeting, whether it's part of an MCC meeting or a separate meeting, to have Panorama hear directly from the community about concerns. That's something we plan on doing. I don't have any timing for that yet, just because we haven't really moved forward, but I will let you know as soon as I have something to share.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, any other comments during public comment? Okay, well, we're going to move on to our consent agendas next. So on the consent agenda tonight, we have one item, which is to approve the minutes for the October 27th meeting. Dave, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Dave, would you please call the roll?
Point of order.
Sure.
I emailed the MCC about an issue that I had with the minutes where
that's right.
It was a gross misrepresentation.
Okay, so if you,
what I said.
Yeah, so hold on. This is on the consent agenda. So we would need to move, if we want to discuss this, we would need to move the minutes to the regular agenda, and we can do that.
I move to pull the minutes from the consent agenda to discuss this.
I seconded it.
Okay.
It doesn't need anybody on the council to do it. Graham is enough.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll pull the consent agenda. We're going to move to the regular agenda, and I'm just going to put this item first on the regular agenda right now so we can talk about it. So public comment on the minutes. We'll go to you, Graham. Go ahead and speak.
Yes, I mailed the MCC in that I thought the minutes of my comments in the last meeting were a gross misrepresentation of what I said, and I would like to see those changed, please.
Okay, thank you for that. Since Sid has her hand raised, I'll go to Sid for comments.
I also, on the September 22nd meeting, had mentioned something, and I sent an email when I saw the draft minutes to please change what the misquotation that I had said, and I did not get a response, and I was out of town for the next meeting, so I didn't get to object. But I would think that if somebody is misquoted, there is a video, and they could go back through and look and see what was said before they just publish minutes to be pushed through. I don't think you should have to come back to the next meeting and object in person if you send an email. That's just me. And the point I made was that I thought the MCC should look at the airport noise issue, and I've made that point twice now. So I'm kind of in support of what Graham said. I think it was Graham, that they didn't, take accurate minutes about public comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sid. Dave, since you prepared the minutes, did you read Graham's email and did you?
Yes, I did.
Did you want to make a change?
In fact, Graham and I had a back and forth on this, on what he thought was actually misrepresenting it. And at least as of, I think, 20 minutes before the meeting, I hadn't gotten a clear understanding. He just, I'll let him speak for himself on why he thinks it's a misunderstanding rather than my speaking for what I think.
Well, you could. So reading my email, I think is that's why what I had said in the meeting was that despite the county spending $2 million on wildfire work in El Granada, not a dime had been spent on the very high fire risk single evacuation route that was El Granada Boulevard. And what appeared in the minutes was Graham asked for more money to be spent. I do not regard that as an accurate representation. And I do understand that minutes need to be a summarization, but that is.
We have to take this to the regular agenda.
This is.
We've already done that.
Yeah, this is now on the regular agenda. I guess you missed that one.
But doesn't that drop to the end or go?
Well, we can decide where to put it, and I put it first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, Dave and I have started a conversation on this. Maybe we should continue that conversation and clarify it. I've sent him another proposal for what I believe is an accurate representation, a shorter one than the one that he didn't like previously. So maybe can we take that offline and rather than disrupt this meeting anymore, do that?
Yeah, so our choices are that someone on the council could move to amend the minutes. Like if Graham wanted to put in the chat what he thought it should say, someone on the council could move to amend them, I believe, and then we could vote on that.
Or
Dave,
somebody
is that
on
correct?
the council can move that we move it to the next meeting.
Right.
I'd like
Does
to
anyone on the council want to make a motion?
move this to the next meeting.
Second,
I second. Yep.
Okay, let's vote on that then.
Okay, so is Dan Lynn?
Correct.
Okay. Sorry. All right, Dan,
yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Claire,
No.
Michelle,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Jill,
Yes.
and Michelle.
I already voted.
Greg,
I'm sorry, I'm lost.
I think you mean Greg.
Greg, thank you.
Greg says yes.
And
Yes.
I am also no, so 5-2, it moves to the next minutes.
Okay, well, hopefully you guys can resolve this on the offline and we will take it to the meeting in December. Okay, so that's it for that item. We're gonna go on to
Excuse
agenda
me.
item.
Michelle, I think if a member of a public feels misquoted, they shouldn't just stick it on the minutes. They should resolve it with that person and not have to backtrack like you did tonight and like it's still not on the agenda for what I had brought up at two
That's
different
not
meetings.
allowed under the Brown Act, Carlisle. It's got to be
Okay.
done publicly.
Then you're just going to push through the minutes how you heard them is basically what it is, right?
No, we moved to wait till next meeting, or possibly at the next meeting.
I'm sorry you staticked out.
Yeah, Dave, you're cutting out, but Sid, what we're doing is we're just moving the minutes to the next meeting and
Okay.
hopefully it can be resolved by
So
then.
will you
We need to move
resolve-
on because we're already 20 minutes
Okay,
beyond
Please
late, so I'm gonna
put
move
the other
on.
thing on the agenda that on September 22nd, I was misquoted. I did bring it up in email. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry,
Let's
that's
try to
over
resolve
and
that.
done with.
Directly with Dave. Okay, so next item is plastic-free future. This is an item that Dan Haggerty suggested we bring to the meeting. And tonight we have, excuse me, Alejandra Warren, the Executive Director of Plastic Free Future. So I'll actually hand this over to Dan to introduce her, and then we'll have her presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So, yeah, I've been very interested in plastics and in our environment, and I believe that our community is also very interested. So, we are fortunate enough to have actually two presenters tonight. Alejandra Warren, who's a sustainability consultant and co-founder of Plastic Free Future, with her husband, Matt Warren, who is the co-founder and science advisor for Plastic free future. So thank you, Alejandra and Matt, for being able to make some time to present to the council tonight. I'm assuming that you're all ready to go. Hello, Alejandra. I see that she was made as a co-host.
Yes, and Matt is going to be sharing the presentation and starting the presentation.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so I guess if it's okay, I would need to be made the co-host as I have the presentation on my, yeah, no problem. Thank you all so much for giving us this platform to present to you all some information about the plastic pollution and what's being done about the plastic pollution crisis in San Mateo County and beyond, both at the county level and also grassroots level, which is something that Alejandra and I are very passionate about, and actually formed this nonprofit organization to address. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see the presentation. I'm going to, okay, let me, sorry about
that
this.
looks good.
Okay, good enough. I'm not sure. Oh, okay. I was trying to reduce the attendance of the Zoom. Okay, great. Yeah, so I am actually a forest ecologist, and I became really interested in plastic pollution sort of through the lens of an ecologist when I learned more about, the more I learned about plastic pollution, really the more concerned I got about how it's affecting our natural ecosystems, our environment, and moreover, the resiliency of our natural ecosystems to the impacts of climate change and also human health. So I'm going to start by just giving you some very basic information about the state of plastics in our world and also at a local level. This is just a simple graph showing plastic production over time and a little bit of a projection from about 2021 now to 2025. But you can see we've had almost an exponential increase in plastic production since the 1950s, really ramping up in the 1960s. So, I like to just ask people to find where you are, find your childhood on this graph, and look at how much plastics were in the world then compared to now. Because 56% of all plastics ever produced have been produced by from the year 2000 to now. So over the past 2 decades, we've had 56% of all plastics on Earth produced just in those 20 years. So it's really sort of an eye opener when you look at how fast plastic production has grown. And also the scale. I mean, we're talking millions of tons. So over time, we're talking, this would be 400 million tons of plastics just in that 1 year. So now we're talking about, the cumulative total in terms of gigatons. So it's a massive amount of plastics. And as you know, I'm sure those plastics are around, they're with us essentially forever. There's no natural decomposition of plastics. So it's quite concerning when we look at those numbers. And also this graph on the right here is just showing how this projection if you look at the projection in 2013, we're essentially just following this curve. So even the projections are not really that far off, or they haven't been, and we are just continuing to produce more and more plastic each year. If we think about the lifestyle or the life cycle of plastic, from extraction, production, then distribution and consumption, and then end of life, this is sort of the story of a single-use plastic. And there's a whole lot of energy and a whole lot of greenhouse gas emissions involved with using an item for, essentially a bag could be used for maybe 10, a half hour or so, or if we're talking about a single-use plastic takeout, let's say clamshell or something like that, you might use it for 10, 15 minutes, and then it gets discarded, right? And so it's really, there's a whole lot of energy and a whole lot of greenhouse gas production and a lot of toxic pollution that is involved at each stage of this plastic life cycle. And in terms of climate change, if we think about the production, manufacturing, transport of single-use plastics, it's really equivalent to a lot, it's producing a lot of greenhouse gases. And so, it's projected that by the year 2050, if we if we stay the course, 15% of all fossil fuel emissions will be from plastic production. And I should say, as we decarbonize our economy, as the global leaders in Glasgow, COP26, try to figure out how we're going to deal with this, with the climate crisis, climate change, and how we're going to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, the fossil fuel industry has a solution to keep their business going, which is produce more and more and more plastics. So, plastics are the raw material for plastics are fossil fuels. The same companies that are, producing fossil fuels produce plastics. And so it really is, sort of a plan B, or, it helps support the fossil fuel business because they can then shift to plastics and further, the plastic consumption and our, kind of push plastics onto us as a society. So, the numbers are quite impressive when we look at the impact of plastics on the climate as well. So it's no problem because we recycle, right? Well, actually, only 9% of plastics that have ever been made have been recycled. And that 9% number, it's kind of a magic number because only 9% of all plastics ever made have been recycled. 9% is also about the recycling rate of plastics in the United States. So it's actually about 8.7. So we're looking at 91% of all plastics are never recycled. So recycling, it's just a very, very small fraction of our of the end of the life of plastics or continued life of plastics. And another issue is that it's actually decreasing. Plastics, because of the global markets in recycled plastics, like the products of, or the raw materials that are produced from plastic recycling have changed. The plastic recycling rates are actually decreasing, not increasing, which is quite concerning. And here's just a flow graph to show, this is the amount of plastic that's recycled, this small little loop here. And it's not that it's recycled, infinitely, it's recycled once. So we have kind of high quality plastics, like let's say a laundry detergent jug, that can be recycled into many, many thin film kind of single-use plastic bags. But beyond that, it becomes discarded, right? So it's not an endless recycling loop. It's only recycled once, and then it goes into the discarded stream here. So it is just kind of a fraction of the amount. And then, so most of the plastic goes straight to landfill or discarded. Of course, there is some leakage into the environment, which is really what we're also concerned about. And a lot of plastic is also incinerated. So in some places, plastic is considered alternative energy, or an alternative energy source. So it can be incinerated and made into energy. However, that process also is extremely toxic in terms of air pollution. It produces a lot of air pollution, and also the byproducts of the ash kind of stuff that's left over after incineration is also very toxic. So where's it going? It's going into our environment in a big way. in the form of both macroplastics, large debris, and also microplastics. So when it breaks down, it just breaks down into smaller and smaller and smaller particles, what we call microplastics. And those microplastics are getting into all organisms in our oceans and surface waters. And their plastics are being taken up by things as small as microorganisms are ingesting plastics, microplastics, and what they call nanoplastics and plastic-derived chemicals, all the way up to whales and larger fish that are eating plastics, mistaking plastics for food. So they're ingesting large pieces of plastic like plastic bags, whereas single cell or microscopic organisms are ingesting microplastics. And all of these plastics are getting into the food web through the process of bioaccumulation. And they're getting into our bodies because we like to eat those. That's where our source of food, a major source of food, and actually the largest source of animal protein throughout the world is fish protein. So humans are consuming the plastics as well, not only in their food, but it also just gets into our body other ways. Think about all of the microfibers of plastic that you're shedding from your clothes and things like that. We're breathing it. It's getting into our drinking water as well. Plastic-derived chemicals are leached from bottles and even other sources. So we're ingesting it, and it's also causing this has a lot of health effects as well. And interestingly, it's not regulated by the EPA. So we're talking about chemicals that we know have an impact on our own public health, but it's not yet regulated. So it's kind of a point of concern. So in terms of San Mateo County, we are, as a county, we consume a lot of single-use plastics in our takeout, in our food deliveries, dining, all of that sort of things. And, this is a study that was done for San Mateo County specifically. And you can see some of the numbers here. Most of the plastic is not recyclable. And almost all of it ends up in Ox Mountain landfill, which I'm sure, as you all know, is approaching its capacity. And so we do, we have to confront the plastic issue here, both as a county, but also in our individual communities and sort of at a local and grassroots level as well. So it's costing us a lot of money, and it's also degrading our environment. So I'll let Alejandra take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. So the reason why we started Plastic Free Future is because we realized that the issue of plastic pollution has always been considered an environmental issue. And thanks to the scientific data that we've been collecting through the last few years, we're starting to understand how it's not an environmental problem. It's a problem of the oceans, it's a climate change problem, it's a problem of human health, and especially a problem of environmental justice, because Black and Brown communities are being disproportionately affected by this pollution. Next.
Sorry, just taking a second to advance the slide for some reason.
So in the next slide, we're going to see what kind of pollution are we encountering in our beach cleanups. This data is coming from different nonprofits in the coast side, Pacific Beach Coalition in Pacifica and Sea Hugger in Half Moon Bay. And this is exactly what we're finding. Cigarette butts, candy wrappers, bottles, utensils, takeout containers, and plastic bags, exactly in this order. So what are we doing as a county, and what are we doing at a city level to prevent this amount of waste not only ending up in the trash, but being produced in the first place? Fortunately, San Mateo County has been really good at putting together an ordinance that's going to be in effect soon for the cities of unincorporated San Mateo County. Is going to be enforced in March next year. And this ordinance is including a lot of items that are going to help us avoid plastic. This includes containers, plastic cups, plastic utensils, stirrers, and straws. Next. The most important thing about this ordinance is that it's encouraging the use of reusables. And we know that the use of reusable materials is probably one of the best solutions to single-use plastic pollution. Not only that, but also to avoid the use of these products that are paper-made that also have consequences. We're cutting trees, we're transporting them, we're disposing of them. So the goal is to reduce the amount of these items instead of switching to items that have issues as well. Next. The new normal for policy and for ordinance, not only in California, but also in Europe, is including language to add reuse for dining in the ordinance. That means that when you go to a restaurant, if you're going to sit down to enjoy your meal, you're going to have a real plate, a real spoon, a real fork, real utensils to enjoy your meal instead of plastic or compostable. So although the San Mateo ordinance doesn't include language on reuse, they are encouraging reuse, but many cities around the Bay Area are already including reuse language, like Oakland, San Francisco, Marin, Los Angeles, Santa Rosa. Even the cities of Half Moon Bay and Daly City have more language for reuse. So why reuse? Reuse reduces the waste of single use. It has a lower impact for climate and a lower impact for water use. It saves businesses a lot of money on the long term because they don't have to buy these materials that we're using one time and then we're discarding them. And it reduces the impact of migration of those toxic chemicals that are so concerning, that are coming from plastic, are ending up in our food, and are causing a huge amount of health issues that we are only starting to understand right now. So we have the feeling that the plastic problem is very similar to the tobacco problem. We're kind of starting to understand the real effect. We have the plastic industry promising that plastic is safe, that if you use it in a safe way, you're going to be okay. And that's exactly the same playbook that the tobacco industry used to convince us that tobacco wasn't toxic or wasn't making us sick until the data came to show that it's actually having a really big impact in human health. So some of the solutions that we created for this are, we're starting to go from item to item. We are working closely with the ordinance and with the consultants from the San Mateo County to talk to restaurants about the ordinance. But also we have programs with Plastic Free Future. We have this incentive program in Half Moon Bay, East Palo Alto, and Pacifica with lots of participants. Every time they bring their reusable bags, they get a point, and with points, they get prizes that are going to help them reduce the amount of single-use plastic they're using. And the reason why we created these programs is because we found that every single market is giving away thousands of plastic bags in just one single day. Next. Another program we have that we developed in Pacifica with funding from the Office of Sustainability was encouraging people to bring their own containers, their own mugs, and their own jars to coffee shops and restaurants to get a little discount, sometimes 25 cents, or sometimes they get a free coffee when they bring the reusable 10 times. And this is to promote reuse, reduce the amount of single-use plastic, and encourage people to use the reusables instead of going for single-use plastic. Next. San Francisco made the mistake of moving towards compostable plastics and bioplastics years ago. They changed their entire ordinance to ask for compostable plastics as a solution. Compostable plastics and bioplastics are all of those plastics that you see that they look like plastic, but they have wording like made out of corn or potato starch or corn-based or plant-based. All of these are really greenwashing options because bioplastic and compostable plastics act exactly the same once they are in the environment. If they end up at the beach or in the park or we're eating with them, they have exactly the same amount of toxics and they behave just like plastics because for them to biodegrade or decompose, they need a really, really high temperature and perfect conditions of moist in the composting facility to be able to break down. And in the real environment, we don't have those conditions. They also have a really big impact in climate because they have lots of greenhouse gases, and they are also laminated with liners that are harmful and have lots of toxins. So compostable bioplastics are not a real solution. Fortunately, the ordinance from the county is including a ban on bioplastics. Next. So the reason why we're giving this presentation is because we as a community, as the coastside community, have a really big responsibility, not only to take care of our own health and the health of our community, the health of our citizens, but also we have the responsibility of the ocean. If you look at the map of the United States and you see the coast, we are just right there, a few blocks from the ocean. And anything we do here has a really big impact. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand the science and the data behind the plastic problem. And we're here for answers if anybody has any questions. Thank you. And thank you, Dan, for the invitation. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. Super informative. First, I'm going to go to the council for any questions.
I have a question.
You go ahead, Jill.
Trying to figure out how to raise my hand. Thank you very much for this informative presentation. I learned a lot and it was something to think about for sure. I've been in this community since 2008, and one of the reasons I like it is many people here think about plastics, and I've even seen teenagers when they get their Burger King or McDonald's come out with their drink without the plastic lid or straw, just because they've been trained to think about, reducing their use. I want to ask you about a couple things. So the first thing is, what do you think about paper bags versus plastic? Because the San Mateo County says they're just as bad because they don't get recycled and they contribute to greenhouse gas emissions just as much as plastic bags. So I want your thoughts on paper bags. And then what do you think about so this plastic bag ban went into effect and then Safeway just switched right over to using plastic bags that they labeled reusable. So those are my two questions. What do you think of that?
Great questions. I'm gonna let Matt answer the one about the paper because he knows the real impact of paper. He's a forest ecologist. So Matt, do you wanna take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I could do the best I can. I think it's kind of tricky because when they make these claims, we have to think about each material in terms of its life cycle analysis, right? Like taking into consideration the whole life cycle of a plastic bag versus the whole life cycle of a paper bag. And one really, I think, critical issue is that plastic bags are with us essentially forever. Like they will end up in the landfill in Ox Mountain, for the foreseeable future. Like a lot of what we see is like 1,000 years. It takes 1,000 years for a bag to decompose, but it never actually decomposes. What happens is it degrades. It degrades into smaller and smaller particles, and it also releases some very concerning chemicals into the environment. And a lot of those chemicals are even contaminating groundwater. So they're finding plastic-derived chemicals in groundwater, which is really kind of concerning. Whereas you don't have those kind of issues with paper. And paper bags, you usually have, they're usually made out of recycled paper, as our plastic bags are usually made out of recycled plastics, or they can be. But paper is kind of different because it can be composted. If it's composted correctly, it will eventually go back to the atmosphere as CO2 rather than methane, which is probably what the county was alluding to, is when it decomposes without enough oxygen, it will produce methane, which landfills produce a lot of methane, versus compost facilities, which will produce CO2 as that stuff degrades. So, all I can say is, I don't think that, I can't understand how one could argue that paper bags are just as bad or worse for the environment than plastics when we take into account the whole life cycle of each of those things.
Yeah, and we also want to emphasize that the reason why we work so hard educating the community about reuse is because if you have one single bag that is whatever bag you already have at home and you can use 1,000 times and you can just put in your laundry and wash 1,000 times, why would you even consider getting a paper bag? It's not necessary, right? We're talking about the extreme situation where we always forget our bags or we're in a rush and we need to get a bag. In that situation, the paper bag's slightly better, but in every single situation, reusable bags are the way to go. For the other part of the question, that is my pain. Every single day I think about that, how the reusable label is going to be captured by the plastic industry and by the fossil fuel industry, greenwashed into a new green word, and just labeling things reusable is not the solution. And then it came the time when they started to ask, okay, but you have to add reusable how many times? So now you see a regular plastic bag with a label that says reusable 125 times. That is just wrong in every single way. Who is ever going to reuse a plastic bag 125 times? That's impossible. So in my opinion, any solution that is plastic is already flawed because of the cycle of plastic is so toxic. And like Matt said, plastic is not like aluminum. Aluminum you can recycle again and again and again and again. But plastic, you have a jug that becomes a plastic bag, and that's the end of recycling for plastic. So every solution, even if it's reusable, if it has plastic, that's already a problem. So yes, good job keeping your eyes open for greenwashing and knowing that the label reusable is not going to be the real solution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I'll go to Greg Diegues.
I don't really have too many questions, but I did want to augment this excellent presentation. As a sailor, I've hung around with sailors who've sailed the oceans. And it turns out there's a whirlpool in every ocean forming a gyre. The gyre in the Pacific Ocean is supposedly twice the size of the United States, filled with plastic. And one of the guys I sail with has come up with an idea for catalytic reactors put on ships that could digest this plastic. But the issue is, who's going to fund that? I would also point out Ox Mountain is going to be filling up in the early 2030s. And so there are a few things I think we need to do that are bigger scale than just our county. We need a carbon tax or a fee-bate where we charge everybody who includes carbon in their products, and then give everybody in the country a refund at the end of the year. And if you've bought more stuff with carbon than normal, you won't get your money back. And if you're conservative, you'll get money back. That avoids complaints about taxes. We also have an issue where China stopped taking recycling back. We need a mandatory take-back policy on the use of plastics. of course, plastics are in just about everything in your world. You may not realize that. The other thing we need, whatever policy we adopt, we need critical mass. And as you've seen from vehicle emissions regulations, California is enough of a critical mass to make most of the country change its behavior. So if we can get the state of California to pass some of these regulations about plastic, whether it's a carbon tax or mandatory take-back requirements, et cetera, then I think we have a hope of changing a broader audience. So I don't know what you're doing in that regard. I certainly support your efforts, but I hope we will also think big as well as thinking local. Thanks.
Absolutely. And we are following closely all of these resolutions from California. Unfortunately, I received some really bad news today saying that a report uncovered traffic of plastic going into Southeast Asia and Africa. And a lot of that plastic is from California, which means that as we get laws from the state level saying we have to recycle more, haulers and companies are struggling. What are we going to do with our plastic? So what they're doing is that they're labeling as recycled and they're shipping it to countries that don't have the infrastructure to process this plastic. So it's really becoming an issue of environmental justice, social justice. So we have to make sure that we are very careful with the laws that we're creating against plastic that is not only related to recycling and controlling the use of plastic, but absolutely reducing the amount of plastic that we have in our lives.
Yeah, and I would love to just add to that. Thanks, Greg. That's, I mean, all just very, very spot on. Great points. And especially, I think, you know, considering the extended consumer responsibility or really, you know, we need to hold the companies that are producing the plastic responsible for the plastic they're producing. And we need to regulate the industry that is producing all of these plastics that are causing all of these problems. And that's where we really, I think, as a nation and as a state, are facing a lot of pushback from the fossil fuel industry. So we have this major industry pouring, you know, billions of dollars into lobbying, into not, you know, opposing any kind of regulation or even putting in place preemptive regulations. So, for example, creating laws making it illegal to have bans or restriction on plastic bags, you know, like then you have to overcome an existing law in order to regulate, you know, some of those consumer items. So, you know, we definitely, we're up against a major fossil fuel industry, and you know, that's just one issue. But you know, I agree. I think if we just, you know, we all have to work together, and we all have to work together at all levels of government and you know, hopefully that's what we need to do to tackle this issue for sure.
Okay, thank you. And next I'll go to Len Erickson.
Yes, thank you. Great presentation. Educationally, we're an advisory body to the county supervisors. Is there any particular type of action we could do relative to communication to them or others to build on what you've done? Do you have any thoughts in that area?
Well, I would suggest adding this conversation to a climate action plan, if you have one or if you are developing one. We could even help you provide the data to show that plastic is a climate issue. And we're trying to find the connections between the climate crisis and plastic, because apparently it's not very obvious for people. You think about the climate crisis and you think emissions, but you don't think that emissions from waste, production from plastic, manufacturing from plastic, distribution and disposal are significantly contributing to the climate crisis. So anything related to climate action plans and anything related to SB 1383, that's in everyone's minds right now, because that's the issue that cities are gonna have to deal with. SB 1383 is really specific about some requirements for composting, for food recovery, and all of those could be avoided if we had better solutions to manage our compost and make sure that we reuse and promote more alternatives, even in policy that include reuse instead of plastic or any other a compostable or fiber material. And to clarify that, I just wanted to emphasize that every time we get a container that is fiber, please pay attention to the container. If it has a little film that it feels like plastic, that is probably not very regulated. That has PFAS, it has all sorts of plastics, and it has toxics that are not regulated yet. So you feel better because you feel like you're using paper and paper is cleaner, but there are also problems behind those items. So stay vigilant and start paying attention, turn on your radar, and learn that bringing your own container for takeout is cleaner than getting a fiber container. And in that way, you start reducing the amount of single plastic we are using. And once we're done with single-use plastic, we can move into bigger issues because the plastic problem is a problem that is bigger than single-use.
Thank you for that. Next, Dan Haggerty.
Yes. So there's a documentary out there. I think it's called Seaspiracy. I have not watched it, but I don't want to ask for comments on the whole documentary. But I think I've heard that there's been some claims through this documentary that the fishing industry is an enormous plastic polluter into the ocean. And so I was hoping if you could just at least shed some light on the truth or not to that claim. I'm very interested in learning whatever you have.
Absolutely. Yes, at a global level, fishing gear is the #1 plastic polluter. And if you think about it, is the one that we have less control because I don't know about you, but I don't deal with gigantic fishing nets. So that is correct. It is correct. But we like to focus on things that we can do through government and through grassroots action. Just otherwise, we just go out in despair and doom and thinking that the world is lost. But yes, that documentary is correct, talking about the global issue with fishing nets and plastic.
Great. Thank you for answering.
Wow. Okay. Let's go next to any members of the public who would like to ask questions or make comments. I'll start with Sid Young.
I have 2 quick questions. I started taking my CRV things down to someplace behind Long's. And, I can't, some of the beverages that I like to drink are, either glass or bottles or cans. So is there any difference? I know I don't hardly ever take plastic down there, but sometimes there's no choice of buying the item in plastic. But if there's a choice between cans and bottles, like in soft drinks, for instance, do you have a preference? I tend towards glass, but I don't know if you do have a preference.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answers are look for clear glass and look for aluminum. Because as I said before, those items are recycled in an infinite loop. In fact, we even have aluminum from the 30s and the 40s that is still going around and around and around. And that is less pressure on precious resources, right? The problem with glass is that depending on the color, it's really difficult to recycle into a new bottle with a different color. So clear glass and aluminum are the best options.
Thank you.
That's great to know. Thank you.
And also, just keep in mind that when we talk about glass and when we talk about aluminum, if we think one step above, which is reuse, think straws, milk, they are doing the things completely right because not only clear glass is highly recyclable, but they're reusing the same bottles before they recycle them.
Brings me back to my youth.
Exactly. And all of these issues is what we talk about every single day. People, when we say plastic-free future, people have a very difficult time imagining a future without plastic. But what we don't think is that we lived for thousands of years without plastic. So we can do it again.
Great. Any other members of the public have any questions or comments? Please raise your hand. I don't see anything, so I'll go back. Anyone else on the council who would like to make any additional comments?
I just wanted to make a closing comment, but if anybody else, looks like Dave's hand's up.
Okay, we'll go to Dave first. Oh, Dave, you're on mute.
Yep, I see that. I was going to say, in response to something Alejandra said, and maybe this is what Dan looking it up, we do that does use nets, and those nets are plastic for the most part, crab traps as well. So that is something we actually can work on locally. Although it's true that a lot of the fishing boats that are deploying the big nets are not actually based Pillar Point Harbor. They do use Pillar Point Harbor for weeks at a time during the year. So we do have contacts with the Harbor Commission, and we may be able to apply some pressure that way.
Yes, and developing a policy around fishing at whatever level we have in our coast side would be really important. We find that the issue is always enforcement. It looks like nobody has the resources to enforce. So if the city has the capacity to have someone for enforcement, that would make it easier for policy.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, so I will go back to Dan for to close this out.
Well, thanks again, Alejandra and Matt. I really appreciate all of the work that you're doing and being able to make the time to present to us tonight. I'm hoping maybe sometime in the future to have you back and just give some ideas on to the community on, there's a lot of, people are trying to eat healthy, and some of the healthy products are in plastic and container, wrappings and this and that, and how to get away from that. I'm sure there's a whole long list of things that we could do better individually. And I think that we all know that, it's probably not going to be easy to make all these changes, but if we never start, we'll never get there. So I really hope to have you back someday. And thank you so much again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I really
thank you
appreciate
for being
it.
here.
Thank you.
And did you have something else to add?
Sorry, just one last thing I would like to say was just, in addition to thank you so much is one thing we can all do is, as you are all reside in unincorporated San Mateo County, they have a great website about their foodware ordinance. It's called Foodware Aware. I'll put it in the chat in a minute. And it's a great place to educate yourself about the San Mateo County ordinance that applies to your area. And you can help to, help businesses. When you go to businesses that you can see are out of compliance, I don't think it's enforced yet, but, let the business know, if you're comfortable doing that, you can certainly encourage businesses to take the right steps towards sustainability. And you can, spend your money on sustainable businesses. That's probably the most powerful way to show that you support that kind of direction towards sustainability. So use your money, and you can also use your voice to kind of, encourage your favorite local businesses to, comply with the ordinance and even take some extra steps towards sustainability. So thanks a lot.
Thank you both, Matt and Alejandra. And I will ask too, if you wouldn't mind sharing your presentation, we can post it on our site. So you can email that to,
I gave him the email address.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, it'd be great to put that on our website. Thank you again. It was great to have you here. Okay, we will move on to the next item, which is Connect the Coast Side. And tonight we have Shonda Singh and Katie Faulkner here from the county, building and planning. I see Lena has her hand raised, so I want to go to her really quickly before we transition over.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry about that. I just wanted to say really quickly that the supervisor had planned to be here to introduce this item, and unfortunately he had a personal conflict come up, so he couldn't make it. And I'm not going to waste my time to try and make a speech that he would make much better, but I just want to say he's really, really appreciative to Shonda and to the whole team and to Katie. So our office is really excited and grateful for all the work that they've done, and I'll pass it over.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and hand it over to Shonda or Katie, whoever wants to kick things off.
right, thanks, Michelle. Let's see. Just, let me see if I can share my screen. Hold on a sec. And put this into the right mode. All right, how does that look to everybody?
Looks good.
All right, let's get started then. So first off, thank you members of the Midcoast Community Council for having us here tonight to present on the final draft of Connect the Coast Side. And thank you members of the public for joining us. My name is Katie Faulkner, and I'm a long-range planner with the County of San Mateo Planning and Building Department. And tonight I'll be presenting along with my colleague Chanda Singh, our senior transportation planner. So we'll start with some background on Connect the Coast Side, just very quickly in case anyone's not familiar. And then we'll give a broad overview of the feedback we received on the previous draft of the plan, which was released back in January of this year, followed by changes made to the plan, and lastly, some next steps for recommending the plan for approval. So just a quick background, Connect the Coast Side is the San Mateo County Midcoast Comprehensive Transportation Management Plan. So it's a plan to improve safety and mobility for residents, businesses, and visitors. And it covers the topics of walking, biking, public transit, driving, and land use. And Connect the Coast Side creates an overall vision for transportation on the Midcoast, and it will set priorities for future investments in transportation. And once the plan is approved, it will help us go out and apply for funding to make the projects in the plan a reality, since having an adopted plan is often a requirement for grant resources. This plan focuses on the Midcoast areas surrounding Highway 1 and Highway 92, including unincorporated communities of Montera, Moss Beach, El Granada, Princeton, and Miramar. So here's a snapshot of the timeline for this project. I won't go over all of it, but I'll say we released a revised second draft, which we call the final administrative draft, back in January of 2021. That incorporated feedback that we had received on the previous draft. And we received additional feedback since that release, and we have since updated our plan, which brings us to the release of the third draft of the plan, which we're calling the final draft, which we released last month. So after releasing the January 2021 draft, we received comments related to policies, infrastructure, implementation, data, and coordination with other agencies. And in order to respond to comments and clarify where changes were made in the plan, we prepared several companion documents to the final draft. So this includes a response to comments that shares general comments received, and then either a response or a clarification or information on where to find the corresponding change in the final draft plan. And we also provided a table highlighting the major updates to the final draft from the previous administrative final draft. And also a memorandum explaining future environmental review for Connect the Coast Side's recommendations. So now we'll provide a high-level summary of the changes that we've made to the plan since the January 2021 draft, based on the feedback we received. So we won't be able to go through all the changes tonight, but we encourage people who are interested to review the companion documents on the Connect the Coast Side website. All right, so regarding land use policy, we received comments requesting revised maps of eligible sites for lot merger and lot retirement programs. And as well, we also received comments asking for further explanation about how the Witt and Abernathy court decisions would affect a mandatory lot merger program. So in an effort to respond to these comments, we revised the analysis for these land use policies. And in doing so, we found that the Witt and Abernathy court decisions, as well as a 2017 update to the county subdivision regulations, were leading to the creation of legal parcels at or above today's minimum parcel size without the need for a mandatory lot merger program. And we found that a mandatory lot merger program could potentially merge and legalize a large number of lots all in a short period of time, which would then create a larger number of legal parcels in a shorter period of time than would happen when compared to the current pace of parcel legalization that's happening anyway. And that we thought could then potentially lead to a greater rate and amount of development in the near term. So that was something to consider. So we have updated chapter 4 of the plan to add this updated lot merger analysis, which is where you can find a more in-depth explanation of these concepts that I just discussed. And I don't want to go into too much detail right now because it might take a little while, but like I said, take a look at the plan if you want to get more of that background. And similarly, in an evaluation of the lot retirement program, we found that the program could pose potential legal issues for the county, while the benefit of such a program would be very limited because we have very few subdivisions in the Midcoast. So for example, from 2010 to 2020, so over 10 years, there were only 3 approved subdivisions in the Midcoast, which created a total of 4 additional parcels. So it just isn't a very big volume of subdivisions. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chanda to continue with her presentation tonight.
Thanks, Katie. So we also received feedback and a request for better coordination and traffic control measures to address congestion during weekends and special events. So in response, we added a traffic control measures program with the county's planning and building department as the lead to collaborate with partners like Half Moon Bay to establish a process for traffic control. We also received feedback on the recreational shuttle program, including requests for connections to the Bayside to support cyclists and to expand the type of transit provided beyond shuttles. So we accordingly revised the program to talk about microtransit, which expands the type of vehicle and service that could be provided to meet that need, and noted the desire for Bayside connections. We also expanded the scope of a future parking study to include all Midcoast communities instead of limiting it to El Granada and Princeton, which the January 2021 draft did. Next slide. We received comments on additional infrastructure that would enhance connectivity and safety, and we added several of these to the plan. These include recommendations for paths in Montera and to the new marked crosswalk completing the Highway 1 and Coronado Street crossing. So the new Montera path would connect to vista points such as the one shown in the photo here at the end of 8th Street. We also received comments that requested the inclusion and evaluation of specific design considerations. For example, consideration of turn and acceleration lanes at Cypress Avenue and Highway 1 instead of an intersection control, or the addition of medians at the Highway 1 crossing locations. And these types of design details are typically evaluated during later phases of project development and aren't really appropriate for us to evaluate in detail as part of this long-range planning effort. So we've included more on that in our response to comments and noted the desire for some of these specifics in the plan itself. Next slide. We received requests for new data collection and analysis in addition to modeling impacts of specific projects. And new data collection is out of the scope of Connect the Coast Side. And so in our response to comments and in the plan, we've described more that new data and evaluation will be collected as individual projects are further developed. Similarly, microsimulations that show how traffic would flow or change in different interventions are out of the scope of a conceptual plan like this. So modeling like that would be done as part of detailed project development and design. We also received requests to include Half Moon Bay's data in the plan. So we updated the relevant sections of Connect the Coast Side with the level of service and delay data that was available from Half Moon Bay's local coastal program land use plan update. We're maintaining the recommended revised performance standards for level of service and the delay index in the plan. And these recommendations would be evaluated further prior to the county pursuing a local coastal program amendment to codify any changes. Next slide. Throughout the development of Connect the Coastside, the county has engaged with other agencies like the City of Half Moon Bay and Caltrans, and we received several comments asking for clarification and more detail to that end. So we've added additional description in the plan of our collaboration to date and the roles of other entities, including references to projects that are being led by other agencies. So for example, we received comments to clarify that Caltrans would be pursuing implementation of bike lanes on Highway 1 in some sections where they're feasible through its state highway operations and protection program. So we've added those references to our projects in the plan. We also clarify that the purpose of the cost estimates and the timeline in the plan is, again, in the context of this long range conceptual plan. So those estimates would be detailed much further as we get further along into project development. We also received comments requesting expanded near-term priorities, and we've incorporated those. They include prioritizing seeking funding for the design of the rest of the parallel trail north of Coronado, rather than just the section from El Granado to Moss Beach, providing annual presentations to the MCC on the status of transportation projects with supporting data rather than every 5 years. And again, the parking study to address all Midcoast communities instead of just the focus on El Granado and Princeton. Next slide. So during the course of our internal discussion and review and finalizing the plan, it was determined that the plan is not considered a project under CEQA, and it would not be appropriate to prepare a CEQA document for Connect the Coastside at this time. And as Katie mentioned, we prepared a memorandum detailing that discussion. So I would also encourage you to review that. And the primary rationale here is that the way that a project is defined under CEQA is as the whole of an action which has the potential for resulting in either a direct physical change in the environment or a foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. And Connect the Coastside's recommendations don't commit the county to an absolute definitive course of action because it doesn't preclude the study of alternatives. So for example, several of the recommendations in the plan already include alternatives that require further study, such as the bikeways on Airport Street or the intersection controls along Highway 1. And plan adoption alone doesn't implement the plan's recommendations. So rather, the adoption of the plan sets the course of our future efforts, such as seeking funding to do detailed evaluation of some of the infrastructure recommendations. So as the county and its partners implement individual recommendations, those would undergo subsequent review to determine whether they're considered projects under the California Environmental Quality Act before we prepare any environmental documents. And again, please take a look at the memorandum we prepared for more detail. Next slide. So our next steps, next slide, are to take the plan for consideration at the Planning Commission in early 2022, and then to the board thereafter for their consideration for approval. And next slide. With that, thank you so much for your time, and we are here to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shawn and Katie, for that. So the plan for us is to review this tonight, ask questions. We'll have members of the council and also members of the public ask questions, and then the council will consider, we'll probably break off into a group of 3 people who would like to write a letter, either a letter of support or a letter with some comments that we would like to make, which we will review and hopefully approve at the next meeting, which will be the first meeting in December, the second Wednesday in December. So first, I'm going to go around to the council for any clarifying questions. And let's keep this to questions about the plan. We'll have an opportunity later to make comments. I'll first go to Greg.
Well, thank goodness we're still in a pandemic, because it took me 5 minutes to get across the Main Street intersection in Half Moon Bay, and another 5 minutes to get through Frenchman's Creek. at 5:15 this evening. So my question is, and I don't need a complete answer right now, but I can't understand how Half Moon Bay was not included in this, because we're connected, as a coast side. Secondly, I want to note for the community an important thing. The feedback that was provided and which was adopted by Chandra and Katie largely came from the MCC's meetings, where we held extensive, lengthy discussions. And I don't want us to forget what a sham the initial feedback sessions were, where we were split into groups of 2 people, 4 people, couldn't hear what other people were saying, and where everybody's response was filtered through mediators that really were suppressing the comments. And I know that Don hired the consultants that did that. But I want us to remember that we have to speak as a group and hear ourselves as a group going forward on this, because this is too important to have it be buried. I guess that's it.
Okay, so there was a question in there. Did Sean and Katie, did you want to speak to Greg's question?
Sure.
About
So
Half Moon Bay?
Yeah, sure. So just the plan takes into account data from Half Moon Bay in terms of the traffic analysis, but it does not make recommendations for Half Moon Bay at the request of Half Moon Bay. But that said, we've been in discussions with Half Moon Bay staff, and I think accordingly we're ensuring that our recommendations are aligned in terms of their connectivity.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'll go to Len Erickson.
Thank you. In terms of understanding what you're doing relative to near-term projects that you've noted, I just wanted to bring up 3 and just ask for your comments on how Connect the Coastside would relate to that. The first is the shop project that's scheduled to be done over the next few years to improve Highway 1 from south of Half Moon Bay up to the Moss Beach southern boundary. And so it's particularly of interest in Miramar and El Granada. There are several places there where there's specific activities that probably need to be brought to Caltrans' attention for their review by next March when they complete their environmental framework. And will you be active in helping do that process, or do we have to go that alone? That is, how can you have those maybe 4 or 5 different areas that we feel need to have comments specifically now to be even included for consideration when the shop project goes ahead? The second is, what will be the next steps for Cypress Point? Again, a project that's been active and waiting for Connect the Coastside. And finally, we have continuing conversation with Caltrans about a crosswalk in Moss Beach at Virginia Avenue. So we have a direct communication with Caltrans about that. Is there any way you can assist or be involved in that in your roles as the Connect the Coastside planners?
So in response to the first question around the shop project, we have continued to share the recommendations of Connect the Coastside with Caltrans and encourage them to include as many as possible in that shop project. Opportunities to stripe crossings and do more. I think that, many of these shop projects are many years in the making, and their real intention is around preservation of pavement. So not all projects that are in Connect the Coast are going to be appropriate to be furthered through that. What we've really been sharing is we would like to make sure that we continue coordinating with Caltrans so that their pavement striping plan and other measures do not preclude the implementation of Connect the Coastside's recommendations. So I guess the short answer there is we're doing what we can to coordinate with Caltrans, and we'd be happy to continue working with you all to for those opportunities.
So you sent direct notes to Caltrans about that you could share with us? I
would continue to share, well, some of them have been by phone, but yes, they have the plan. We continue to share the plan and point out the opportunities. And I think we participated in conversations. They've had some early meetings with agency stakeholders around that shop project, but Caltrans has not shared any specific plans yet. I'm not sure if they've been prepared yet. So we don't have, for example, like 65% design plans or something that we can comment on. Your second question.
The next steps on Cypress Point.
Oh,
project.
so I would try to, Cypress Point, mid-pen housing, it is on their own timeline in terms of whenever they're going to prepare the next step after their LCP amendment was approved around the PUD designation. So we, to my knowledge, have not received an application. I'm not the project planner on that project. So there isn't really we've been in touch, and again, they are aware of Connect the Coast Side, its timeline and its recommendations, but their application for a CDP, I think, is a separate conversation from this project. And then your third, Len.
The Virginia Avenue crosswalk, where they're working on a rapid flashing beacon. That's direct conversation with the operations side of Caltrans. Are you involved in either reviewing it for effectiveness when it's installed, or in any way involved in any efforts we have on that project?
My involvement has been pretty limited so far, but I do know that there have been some conversations around the permitting process for that. So I don't know what the status is of. I know that I think the last time we spoke was around getting PG&E or getting electrical to be able to put in the beacons. I'm not sure where things stand right now, but I'm happy to continue to participate in those conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just on that, Len, we have a better sense, at least from Caltrans directly, on where that stands, right? Last we heard that would be completed by the end of the month.
No, I know we do, and they expect to have it operational going into at least capable of being operational in December. I just wanted to know when it reaches that point whether Chanda, her department, would have any involvement relative to support questions or other things.
I think that our involvement would be pretty limited because I think as planning and building, we're really around the permitting side of that at this point.
My understanding is they don't have interest in doing further permitting, but they expect to go live when they expect to go live. Is that consistent with your understanding?
I'm not aware. I'd have to check in with our department, other staff.
Is there a separate planner who would deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my. I'm on the long range team, so I'm not aware of that permit process right now, but I can check in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next I'll go to Dan Haggerty.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. I'm sorry, but I have to take issue with not having early discussion on specifics of the traffic mediation issues in Connect the Coast Side. With the complications of the whole shop projects that's coming up, and it just seems that Connect the Coast Side seems to be shaping ideas for circulation, early on, and it's. I hear you say that specifics are going to be dealt with later, but I think that I'm concerned that the broad ideas are being put forward, and certain ideas are just left out completely. For example, pedestrian underpasses and specific talks on what can we do to improve some of the existing traffic signals, because everybody knows traffic is a big issue. We only have the one artery here, and we just have to be good stewards of its use so that we don't wind up with a train wreck at the end of this. So, I really would like opportunities to talk more about specifics early on before it goes on. So that's my, and I'm hearing you saying that we just don't have that opportunity. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm sharing is that I think we can't do in the plan necessarily is say this is absolutely able to happen. We can't do that level of evaluation. So we've tried to note things in the plan around the desire, like we've heard, from the Highway 1 safety and mobility studies that raised medians were an important element that were in that plan around the pedestrian crossings, for example. But we can't evaluate whether that's feasible or possible. So what we're pointing to, the purpose of Connect the Coast Side and the initial intent was around addressing, future build out and how the system could accommodate what that looks like. And so I think the intent of the plan is really to address that major charge with the acknowledgement that there are design features that people have asked for and requested and study that just aren't possible at this level of planning. So, the grant that was mentioned earlier in this discussion, we applied for to pursue the project initiation document. And I spoke about that at our September meeting, to be able to dive a lot deeper into, well, what is feasible? What would traffic flows look like? What are our options? I think the conversation around the undercrossings and overcrossings has largely been around the ADA piece, and that we can certainly keep talking about the geometrics, but that the amount of land that would be required and the geometrics, and with the flood, I'm not a civil engineer. I'm not a structural engineer. I don't fully have that background. Is that my understanding is that it would be cost prohibitive to do that. So what you're hearing me say, I guess, is that we can't be absolutely definitive in a long range plan like this. Really, the intent is to set the course for future action and study.
Some of those concerns with the land, I've already proposed some solutions to that, but they weren't, I don't feel were acknowledged. So I'd like that opportunity. I don't know if right now is appropriate.
I don't know, Shana, do you want to respond to that?
I guess I was just going to say that if you feel like we haven't adequately, heard some of your detailed ideas for inclusion in the plan, it might be helpful for you to put that in writing to us. And so you can send me or Katie an email. I feel like we've tried to acknowledge and share feedback based and what our research has been through the FAQ document that was prepared last year during our public outreach and after we got a lot of questions, especially specific to the undercrossings and overcrossings and thereafter. So I think it might be helpful if I'm really just not hearing or understanding, Dan, just to put it in writing for me.
Yeah, I've presented in the past, but it was just everything was just not even acknowledged. But the slick thing around the ADA issue is essentially the ADA lifts. They're used throughout the county. They're used everywhere, so that you would not need the ramp, the geography you'd need for a long ramp. There are ADA lifts being used today that should get around that issue of the long ramps, stairs, and an ADA lift. They're operational all over the place. You just got to look for them.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Len. Did you have another question? You're on mute, Len.
Yes, the previous questions I asked were fairly specific to projects. At the other end of the spectrum, you have a delay index proposal. If I understand it correctly, once you have completed the review of Connect the Coast Side, including the Planning Commission approval, the Board of Supervisors approval, and then you basically file it. But then there are particular elements in the document, such as a delay index, that will require going to the Coastal Commission to get their approval for modifying the LCP. And in doing that, if there's concerns we have about the delay index as you proposed it relative to bicycle impact on level of service. Will the time to then be to bring that discussion to the Coastal Commission, because it will have already passed approval going up through the Board of Supervisors?
Yes, that's correct. I think we need to go through a deeper process around the LCP amendment that we would pursue and what that package would look like. So that would be the time that we could have further discussion and you could bring it to the Coastal Commission.
And in looking something like that, that seems that might be something where some level of simulation would be appropriate to try to validate the claim like that.
I am not sure. I'm not a traffic engineer. I think that we could talk about that further. I think the idea isn't necessarily to, it's sort of it's what are we willing to accept? Like, for example, on the Bay side, if you were to look at our congestion management the county's congestion management plan that is developed by the city and county associations of governments, you have in there the data that shows delay, level of service, and sort of what's considered our acceptable level on the Bay side, and it's very different. And what's acceptable on the coast side. And I think because of the population and the traffic, those values are different. And so I don't know if simulation is exactly what I would call it or modeling, but there might be more data analysis there.
The concern is it's very hard to evaluate the type of claim you want to make for delay index in terms of what bicycles should do to change the level. So just trying to look ahead. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the council? Claire?
I just wanted to follow up with what Len was asking. Len, were you trying to address how the acceptable length of stay changes when you add facilities for bicycle and pedestrian transportation?
That's right. Basically, it's if we have a class 2 bicycle lane, does it really provide the level of improvement that the change they're looking for in the index value that puts it in the acceptable range?
You know, my understanding on that, and perhaps I'm cynical, but maybe you can tell me if I'm right or not, Chandra, is that the reality of whether the actual time you spend in your car changes is not important. What happens is what's important is a calculated change in LOS, which changes by a certain factor if you add in other opportunities like bike lanes. That it's a arithmetic function rather than a reality function. Is that roughly true?
So they're just two different ways of measuring two separate things. So they measure and represent completely separate things. The plan is not claiming or stating that if we add bike lanes, delay will go down. What it's saying is that our threshold for impact will be different if the project is because, okay, so the threshold for impact is 2.0 or 3.0, dependent on what type of facility is there. Because if there's a true alternative way of getting around to a single occupancy vehicle, and I think that's what Len is stating is, is a class 2 bike lane a true alternative to driving? Does it provide a high quality facility or not? Should the delay index be 3 or 2 if that facility is provided? Right now, the county doesn't have a way, there's no policy codified around delay. All we have is some level of service thresholds, and they're really related to roadway expansion. So our ability to encourage different types of projects and providing of different types of facilities is pretty limited. So I think that this is a conversation we keep having and continue on the details. And I think that's part of why we want to go a little deeper prior to bringing any kind of amendment to the Coastal Commission for this, because I think there's lots of different ways to measure who we're serving and how we're serving. How is the transportation system facilitating different types of travel? And when should something considered be below or above a significance threshold? And why is it considered a significant threshold or not?
It seems to me that this is emblematic of the entire plan in that the plan itself is less concerned with the actual conditions that will eventuate from the plan than it is in just completing the plan and getting a basic overall framework and way of measuring things. That is similar to what you were saying to Dan, that we're not going into that level of detail at this point. We're simply making a framework that we can build on in the future. Is that basically correct?
I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're saying, but yes, this is a long-range conceptual plan that is providing the county with a direction to go to, but we aren't going to implement things, you know, before a more detailed study and before they're considered, you know, most of the projects in the plan are considered needed under existing conditions as we measure them now because of safety issues and need that's been brought up through our outreach and engagement. But so yes, it's a strategic direction for us to move forward because the details do matter for the implementation for the county. Okay, but some of this, I'm sorry if I'm going off on it in an ununderstandable way, but some of this seems to be in the language of highway design and traffic engineering and that kind of thing, which seems to be a little bit in its own world and not too much connected to what's really happening out there on the street. And I can accept that's the kind of planning you need to do for a plan like this. But I also am waiting to see how it actually will affect us. Any of this will affect us because I think it's several steps removed from what we actually deal with. So we'll see. Thank you. Fair enough.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Okay, I don't see any other members of the council with their hands raised, so I'm going to go to the public for questions or comments. So now's the time if you have any comments or questions on the Connect the Coast side to go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll go in the order of hands raised, starting with Sid Young.
I'm a little disjointed here because it's hard to read over everything and then try to take notes. But I believe that one of the spots I was looking at in your whole big report said that there was some traffic control. That's all they called it. They didn't say signal or roundabout. So that sounds like it's still up in the air, and the promised intersection modification or whatever you want to call it at Cypress and Highway 1 is a lot more expensive than some of the other ones. So is that more planned for a roundabout, do you know? Or you don't know anything because it hasn't been funded?
So the determining what intersection treatment is there, and intersection control just means, you know, use of regulatory signs and or like a traffic signal or roundabout to actually control the traffic at a location as opposed to just the rules of the road.
So non-specific.
So what the grant that we just talked about earlier will help do is determine the trade-offs and alternatives between different options for the Moss Beach corridor. The plan itself continues to recommend a roundabout as the preferred option at 16 Cypress in California, and the cost estimates are incorporate that. They assume that it's a roundabout, but again, they're conceptual with contingencies. So once we actually figure out what is appropriate and why, because there may be environmental considerations, for example, endangered species that would be impossible for us to address without, being cost prohibitive, for example, that might preclude the ability to go forward with a roundabout.
I got it. So then basically I'm still hearing that there's, even if you put this plan forward exactly as it is, it's just to maybe approach a plan until things accomplish full build out. But if you wait long enough, because I've been coming to these meetings since 2012 on Connect the Coast Side, we may achieve total build out before there's ever any, actually anything accomplished. I'm just curious if you have any timeline for one or two of the projects, like is Cypress, let's call it intersection control, going to take place before they spend money on Gray Whale Cove, which doesn't have any residents involved, that kind of thing. Do you know what the priorities are? Because I didn't see anything. It just sounded like a kick the can down the road conceptual plan. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm actually being realistic. It doesn't sound like there's any full plan because you have no money, right?
Right. So we have to seek, because this plan has been in development for a long time, some agencies like Caltrans, for example, have started to move forward with projects that are also included in the plan. So as Len was mentioning earlier, they have a completely separate program and project called the SHOT program, where they're going to be doing repaving of a large section of Highway 1. They are going to implement bike lanes where feasible as part of that repaving project, which is great. The recommendation has been in the plan for a long time, but there's different ways that things can be funded. So for example, the Gray Whale Cove project and doing crossings on Highway 1 came out of the 2015 preliminary planning study, Highway 1 congestion and safety program that was funded by the Transportation Authority and led there. So that project is just on a completely different timeline because of how transportation projects can happen. So the design. So, I think where we are at is, which I've just shared with you, is we have a table in the back of projects and policies that we hope to move forward sooner rather than later. The first step that we've taken is apply for funding through the Transportation Authority's highway program call for projects to continue that process, to continue to the actual next step of project design, not project design, but project initiation for those intersection controls.
So I just wanted to, that's it. I just wanted to say that I kind of agree with Dan about the underpass in Moss Beach, but it sounded to me in all the meetings, even back as far as Joe Leclerc, whenever it was brought up by Dan or anybody else, it was kind of just brushed off. I never really saw any kind of research that said how much extra it would cost. You guys just said, oh, too much money. But last week, there was a 3-car wreck and one of them flipped at that spot where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. And this evening I had to go up, I think it was starting to get dusk, and there was a woman standing on the side of the road. It didn't really appear she was ready to cross, but cars were just going right through that crosswalk. So, I couldn't tell. She didn't give any body language like she was moving out into the crosswalk, or I would have yielded to her, but nobody else was either. And I thought maybe she was just standing on the side of the road. But I really feel like more pedestrians are going to get injured in that crosswalk because there's not enough illumination, especially at dusk. And I don't know, it seems to me those kind of things that are human accidents waiting to happen or should be more priority. But that's just me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sid. I'm going to next go to JQ Oswan.
Hi, yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is to follow up on the comments that Lynn and Claire made regarding the delay index and the impact of bike lanes. The rationale that's in the document now really doesn't make sense. It's not clearly explained as to why, if you add bike lanes, it's okay for the delay index to go from a 2.0 to a 3.0. It would seem more relevant to actually show how or to what extent bike lanes will actually improve traffic. So if there was a way to directly measure the impact of bike lanes on the delay index, that would seem more appropriate and more in line with what we're really looking for here. Otherwise, just allowing the delay index to increase seems to suggest that the mere presence of bike lanes means that it's okay for the traffic to be worse or for gridlock to occur. So I'd like for you to comment on that. And perhaps the real effect here is on vehicle miles traveled. But in any case, I think you need to rethink the rationale for bike lanes and how they will actually improve traffic in this plan. And then a separate question that I have is regarding the project implementation timeline in table 33 of the plan. And I'm just wondering why of all the projects does the 16th Street Highway 1 intersection, which is item number R5, why does that not have any medium-term activity associated with it? Of all the projects there, it's the only one. So anyway, those are my questions.
So on your second,
go ahead and respond, please, Shonda.
Oh, sure. So on the second question, sorry, I'm just scrolling down to table 33. And that may have been an oversight. I see we put the phases 3 and 6. I think because, well, the truth is that there is near-term activity happening because we did apply for that grant, which includes that location. But in terms of construction and what that looks like, 16th Street was the one that had the least, had sort of, well, I guess it's twofold. One, we include that project around the Carlos Street realignment to 16th Street, so it's connected to that project R5. And so part of the rationale there was to ensure that those projects are considered and done together. And that realignment project, which is a long-term project, because of its likely cost, complexity, and environmental impacts, was pushed out into the long term. So I don't think that, this is sort of a general sense of where we think things might happen. But I'll just say that we've sort of tried to move forward with, lumping R5, at least the first phases of R5 through R6, sooner rather than later, developing the project initiation document. On the delay index piece and rationale, I think there is a VMT. So the state and the county are certainly moving forward with trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled because of the environmental impacts. And with the options being really limited on Highway 1, what we wanted to do is give ourselves flexibility and ability to provide a bicycle and pedestrian facility. So the intent is to provide a Class 1 path for the parallel trail along the entire length to have a dedicated bicycle and pedestrian facility. We want to recognize that there may be cases where it won't be possible to provide a dedicated bicycle pedestrian path. We just don't quite know yet, dependent on the actual infrastructure that's in place. So part of the rationale there was to just provide some flexibility in the actual threshold and sort of significance. But I'm definitely hearing that, more explanation and thought and research into that would be helpful. Additional framing could be helpful. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'll go to Dolores Silva.
Hi. I kind of wanted to follow up on Claire's observations in that it's hard to embrace this in some ways, in that so much is beyond the 10-year timeframe, which is, all right. I understand funding and coordination with other agencies. It takes a long time, but what I really want to know is, how is this going to be utilized, this Connect the Coastside plan? We're talking a lot about trying to apply for funds and get coordination with other agencies and all this stuff. But how is this going to be applied when it comes to development? I mean, I think that was the crux of what Claire was asking. I mean, the build out could be complete without much of this being done. I mean, all the big projects are probably beyond the 16-year timeframe. I mean, the plan acknowledges that the timeline that has been noted in the plan is optimistic, and that it's very competitive to get these funds that will need to be funding much of this plan. And in the meantime, here we are facing climate change and a changing dynamic in the whole work structure and whatever, and things like the bimodal trail and improved transit and all this stuff is out there way beyond 10 years. So what's happening in the first 10 years when all these development projects are in the loop that we know of so far? I mean, there's going to be more. Is this plan useful for those projects? I mean, certainly everything is kind of modeled. It's not approved. It's not concrete. So I think that's the big concern for us, because we already have traffic issues, whether it's driven by residential development or visitor traffic, and there's safety issues on the highway. And yet we're still contemplating adding more development. So how will this plan be applied, or is it applicable for developers to point to it as, oh, they're going to solve the problem?
So
did you want to respond?
I might ask Katie to help me too. I think that so when a large project comes in, there's different ways that, conditions, if there's a discretionary action that the planning department is taking, and there's impacts due to our own policies and ordinances and general plan or through CEQA, this could be a way to point to this plan around opportunities to sort of use the plan as a way to mitigate for those impacts. And so that's, I think, the opportunity that's sort of on the table. And I'm not I'll be perfectly honest, I've always been worked in policy and long range planning. And so that development side is a little bit more, I'm just becoming more familiar with it working here. So, my understanding is just like any other long range plan that we may have, or the policies of the general plan, once we start incorporating them into actual ordinances and policies, they can be used to establish conditions on projects. And so Connect the Coast side and its approval helps us take then the next step to codify some of this work, and also have something to point to for larger projects to mitigate for if they have impacts. But just because a project is coming online, that doesn't mean that they have to implement Connect the Coast side, as part of their project, but it provides us an opportunity to take a cohesive approach for that. So this is one of the, again, I think why we want to finish the plan and start moving more towards understanding what might be feasible, where are the opportunities to implement, because to your point, it's been in development for a long time. Projects are happening, and there continue to be safety issues. And so regardless of development or not, we want to do our due diligence and implement projects that are needed to address those concerns.
It may be an unfair question, but really my question is more about, will the county allow developers to use this to get them off the hook for the impacts that their developments will cause, when none of this is funded, approved, or who knows if it's even likely to happen? That's a big mystery, because things are so far out and things are so uncertain. It's just I guess it's a worrisome thing almost to have this out there when, as a plan, when it is so uncertain about which pieces will be funded and which pieces will actually be implemented, yet the county and say the developer can point to it and says, that's going to take care of it. And yet it could be, I mean, some of these projects could take 30 years if they happen. I mean, I don't believe they'll happen if it takes that long, but by then, who knows if Highway 1 will even be here. It's kind of an interesting dilemma here that we have, but I guess we'll find out as it comes up.
I mean, I guess I would just add, for an individual project, it will probably have its own, it'll obviously have its own review. It'll have its own conditions of approval based on that specific project, based on impacts. So, I don't think we can really necessarily give a substantial comment about, will a county let projects through based on Connect the Coast side? Each project will go through its own process.
I understand it's an unfair question, but it's just that it was early on, Connect the Coast side was presented as running in parallel with Cypress Point. And originally Cypress Point pointed out to some significant traffic impacts that they have now backed off of because they're pointing to Connect the Coast side. And that's just one example because that's a project that's active. It'll be interesting to see how Connect the Coast side could be used as things go further along. And that's a significant concern for residents here, that things are going to get worse before they get better.
Okay, thank you, Dolores. We need to move on. I'm going to go to Anne next.
Thank you. My question actually is that there is a new U.S. geological maps of hazards out, and I want to know if that is going to be taken into consideration, particularly earthquake zones that may not have been in previous maps. The reason I'm asking is because much of 16th Street is in an earthquake fault zone and liquefaction zone, and this could really significantly impact the type of road or what could be built there, as well as the multimodal trail. And so I just want to know, is that being considered along, with the planning?
I mean, I can just jump in and say that the county has recently updated its hazard mitigation plan. And that did look at, all the recently updated hazard maps that were available basically as of last April. We're also going to be updating our safety element in the coming year. And so if there are any more new maps since April, then, that would be considered in our safety element update. And that safety element update will also, consider different policies that we could use for development, for infrastructure going forward in the future. So I think that is something that we will be looking at. It's just not something that Connect the Coast side is, specifically designed to address, but it is something that the county is considering, and we're definitely moving forward on projects to keep up with updated maps, hazard maps.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other public hands raised, so we're going to go back to the council. And I see Claire already has her hand raised, so we'll go ahead and start with her. It's your turn, Claire.
Okay. I just was thinking that I wasn't terribly clear when I spoke before, and I was trying to think of a way that I could say what I was trying to say in a more clear way. So I'm going to try this one. When you're in the hospital treating a patient from a medical point of view, the medical team can look at the patient two different ways. And they usually do look at it two different ways. One is you go in and look at the patient, you see, are they breathing well? What's their mood? Are they talking well? Are they eating? What's going on? How do they feel? So you can deal with that part of it. Or you can go back to the nurse's station, you can get the chart, you can look at the chart, you can see what the lab work says, you can see all the numbers. And that tells you something about what you're doing too. But a lot of times medical teams end up doing what they call treating the chart, so that you get all the numbers to look just exactly the way they should look. But the real thing that you want to do is make sure you're treating the patient, and that the patient is the real world that we live in here on the coast. So ideally, you want to get the treating the chart and the treating the patient to be the same. And I don't think that that's happening here, and I don't think it can happen here. I think what you're doing with the plan is treating the chart. You're getting all the numbers to look right. And hopefully that'll end up helping the patient, which is us. But they're two different things. And I appreciate all the work you're doing because you're doing a really good job of treating the chart. But we live in a more concrete world. And that's, I think, where some of our frustration is coming from. So hopefully that's clearer.
You know,
I appreciate
like
that
analogy. I was just going to say, I think we are trying to treat the patient. I think that's what the approach we're trying to take. And, you know, I would just say, if all we were doing was looking at the numbers, we'd still be recommending widening Highway 1 because that would help us with the numbers, but that's not what's right for our patient overall. So we're trying to do both, but I can let, I don't know if Chandra has more to add.
It's always hard to get both of them going at the same time and really meshing. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. That was a great analogy. Next, I'm going to go to Dan.
Yes. So I feel I need to just say that, from my opinion, Connect the Coast side is recommending what the Connect the Coast side feels is needed, when many in the community disagree with what the Connect the Coast side is saying is needed. And I'll end there.
Okay. I do see we have another member of the public with their hands raised. Maybe I closed that public comment too quickly. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, but I will just say last call right now. If you want to speak during public comment on this item, please raise your hand, and I'll go to Rob for his comments.
Yes, I've been looking at the executive summary briefly. I assume there's a large and increasing bike and pedestrian traffic up the California Coastal Trail from Half Moon Bay to Devil's Slide. And I personally want to be able to get safely from Half Moon Bay to Montera. I'm trying to understand how Connect the Coast side is recommending this pedestrian bike traffic get across Highway 1 from the west side in Moss Beach to the east side in Montera. You know, by looking at the executive summary drawings. Now I see proposed intersection control at California 16th and Cypress, and is a thought that bikes are crossing at one of those. Is 16th going to be developed as a crossing? And then when I look at the drawings, you know, at your design drawings, and I go from the Moss Beach. We have the coastal trail on the west side, and then it disappears on the next drawing. And I think your match lines could be a little better. You're missing property, which would be helpful to either. Is the idea that it's jumping over across the street at 16th and heading up on the red multimodal trail? Well, what is the plan for crossing? What is the recommendation? And
Chandra or Katie, do you want to take that?
Yes. So, and I'm just trying to pull up the same map that you're looking at, but yes, we have the coastal. So the multimodal parallel trail will run along the east side of Highway 1 for the entire Midcoast. But then the coastal trail will share an alignment with the multimodal parallel trail crossing over at 16th Street, where we're hoping to have a control intersection there to allow for a safer crossing. The plan also recommends an overcrossing at that location eventually near there at Carlos Street to connect. So that would be another longer term option. But yes, that was the intent there, if I am remembering correctly.
Yeah, I'm looking at drawing page 12 of 16, and the coastal trail disappears there, and I guess it goes over a bridge or it goes across. The idea, at least for the next few years, would be that all the traffic coming up the coast that wanted to be on the coastal trail and up on the bluffs and so on, that they have to get across, right? Because if you go to the next page, there's no more coastal trail on the west side. There's like intermittent chunks of it. So I assume you're saying it's going across, and the idea is that everybody should cross. I mean, the recommendation is going to be cross at 16th, and you're going to improve that so that's safe for people to do that in the near term. How does that go down? Is that a few years of unsafe crossing of all the traffic, bike traffic going north and south?
Yeah, I mean, at this time, we don't have we don't recommend in the plan any sort of near-term, long-term solutions. We're just recommending a future control at that location and crossing. So this is a recommended alignment of the coastal trail with that recommended crossing there. But I can't comment on an exact timeline when a project like that might move forward.
All right. It just seems that we should prioritize people coming up that side of the highway trying to get across the highway. I mean, how do they do it? How do I send my kids up the road or whatever the case may be? Where should they cross for the next few years while we wait for the overpass? Okay. One other comment. I'd like to see a feasibility study and a conceptual plan to install a pedestrian tunnel underpass in Moss Beach. And I think that'd be reasonable for the county to assign a qualified engineer to evaluate if it's just reasonable for the county to consider performing a preliminary investigation of feasibility. Have somebody spend a few days or week and get some pros and cons. I searched your document for tunnel. I've been going to these things for 10 plus years. And I agree with the two previous comments. The tunnel has been swept on. There's been no reasonable discussion of it. I think Claire or somebody talked about it for a couple of minutes, and I'd like to have somebody take a look at it and get the pros and cons. Evaluate the drainage, evaluate so on. And I've just context. I actually built the tunnel underneath the John Daly Boulevard to the BART station in Daly City. So I've seen things done. In any case, that's my thought. Yeah, just get somebody to spend a few days and let's just get some pros and cons down on paper.
Okay, thank you, Rob. All right, so public comments now closed on this item. I'm going to go around to the members of the council who haven't had a chance to make comment. Also, just a note, because we will be most likely writing a letter for our next meeting. If there are anything that you would like to see included in that letter, now's the time to make mention of that. Or if you want to be a part of the group that puts together that letter. So Greg?
You put your finger on the process issue. I'm hoping to work on the scoping study in the wildfire issue subcommittee. I do have comments, both mine and those forwarded to me by members of the public. I'm not prepared to bring every one of those up now. I haven't even had time to read more than the executive summary of this document. Yet we have to draft a letter and we have Brown Act issues. So I would like to understand how I and other members of the MCC can submit comments for consideration for the letter without violating the Brown Act. I do recall Tim Fox saying we could submit materials for agenda items and have those posted on the website before a meeting. But that's the dilemma. This is too big and too important a document to say we have to bring everything up on our mind right now and expect it to be thorough and comprehensive. It's going to take some time.
Well, we're not going to change the Brown Act, and that's the rules we're living under. So if you're not ready to bring up items at this meeting, I think the only real opportunity is either you're a part of the group that puts together a letter, or we delay, have it either basically do the remaining process over 2 meetings, either by having, we only have one more meeting scheduled on the calendar for this year, which is the first meeting in December, because we have the second meeting in November falls right the day before Thanksgiving. The second meeting in December is right around Christmas time. And so we could either put a special meeting on the calendar, or we could delay this till January, which I think is going to be problematic. We can talk about that, but yeah, or you can be a part of the group that writes it.
So can I speak to that briefly?
Yeah.
I'm not understanding why there's a rush to do this. This final draft is just out. It's huge. There's a lot of changes in it. Why would we expect to be writing a letter about this before February?
Let me have Shonda speak to or Katie, one of you two speak to the timeline of when this is to be brought to the Board of Supervisors and the steps forward from here. The Planning Commission, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would like to take this to the Planning Commission in January and the board thereafter, which I'm guessing will end up being in March. It just with the internal review process and timeline for getting on a board meeting. So that was our intended timeline.
So I would say that timeline is completely unreasonable, given that this thing has dragged on as long as it has, and there have been so many changes. Expecting us to be done with this, apparently I'm being told my connection is unstable. Anyway, expecting us to do this during the holiday period is just insane. We need to be able to discuss this in live meetings because of the Brown Act. And we need at least 2 different meetings to discuss it. And I'm a fast reader, and I looked at what was there and I said, I'm not even starting on it. And I'm not going to start on it until next year. And I think we should ask that this not go to the Planning Commission in January. February, maybe. March, more likely.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. I think Glenn wanted to make a comment next.
Well, just a comment, their current target is to take it to the Planning Commission in January. I assume if that were to mean the second meeting in January, the Planning Commission, that would allow us time both in December or January to schedule extra meetings. I don't think that, I think unless we're willing to go to extra meetings, that it's not a credible claim that we're working hard to do it. That's over 2 calendar months to work with. So I believe the question is whether we want to put in extra time. And that as long as the Planning Commission meets in the second meeting of January to work on that basis, then I think we should be able to schedule meetings if we want to spend that much time.
And I completely disagree.
Understand. So that's, there's no problem in disagreeing.
Shonda, when
My
is the
comment is,
Planning
again,
Commission?
yeah.
Let me just get clarification here. When is the Planning Commission meeting in January that we were planning on taking it to? Do you know the date?
I don't know the date offhand, but it would be the second meeting. It would not be the first meeting.
Okay. Our first meeting in January is the 12th. So I'm assuming that would be before then. I mean, what we could do, I would ask members of the council what you would like how you would want to have a discussion about this. Like, do you want specific topics? Do you want Sean and Katie to be here again to answer questions? Especially people like Dave who have issues with this timeline. And Greg, what are the kinds of things that you want to do at a follow-up meeting?
Can I speak to that?
Right. Yeah, I'm asking you and Dave.
So I want to gather community feedback And I want to put together a set of comments, which is reviewed by the MCC and as input to a potential letter. But I want to work on the scoping project for the fire thing first, because that is going to get done and things are going to start to happen. This thing is decades long effort. So the idea that we're adding a month or two to a decades long effort compared to the urgency of the wildfire situation, to me, it's no comparison. I'm working on wildfire first.
Okay, but that's your personal priority, but they can happen simultaneously. I was just more asking about, just so I can plan what the structure of the meeting would look like. Dave, what were you thinking?
I was thinking essentially a study session where people bring their comments, we discuss them, we clarify them, find out, where we have consensus, where we don't. I think that this is a big enough issue, and we've heard enough from the community over the last N years that we're not going to write a letter that says, hey, the community thinks this. We're going to end up writing a letter that says the community is split on this on multiple issues. And I think we owe it to ourselves and the community to convey all of that information. We can say the community says X, but we don't agree with them. Or half the count them and the other half doesn't. But I don't think we're going to write a letter where we have a consensus on everybody agrees on our answer to all the important points. So I think given the Brown Act, the only way we can do that is multiple study sessions. And they're going to be 2 or 3 hour meetings.
Just on this topic, you're thinking?
Yep.
So it's separate from our regular meetings.
And I think it's a big enough topic. It deserves it.
And I guess I would just ask what, we've been through multiple rounds. Obviously, this predates even my time, and many of our times on the council, but we have had multiple rounds of review and feedback. And I guess I would ask, do we think that there are new items that we're going to bring up that are going to fundamentally change this plan at this stage?
I don't know the plan. What I'm saying is what we will do is we will have feedback on the plan. I don't think we're going to say, hey, the data in the plan is all wrong, or they missed some huge thing that nobody else thought of until we just realized it right now. I think what we're going to try and do is say where the community consensus is and where there is no consensus.
Dave, are you arguing only to have regular meetings for these study sessions, or are you open to having extra meetings?
I'm fine with it being an extra meeting, but I'm retired. I'm not sure that everybody else on the council agrees with that.
Well, we should find out whether the council is willing to have extra meetings, I think is one important step to take.
Yeah, and if so, when? December, do we throw an extra meeting? Do we move the second meeting in December up? Yeah, so
I can say that I have enough commitments between now and Christmas that I cannot reasonably discuss this before Christmas. I will not have read enough and digested enough of it before Christmas.
Okay, and I'll just point out that in January, we also will have an extra meeting as a retreat, which is typically like 4 or 5 hours long.
Yeah,
so
and we could do it
big
part of that
time
too.
commitment.
I don't know. Yeah, but
okay.
Again, this is a 12-year project. If you include the safety and mobility study, which we all seem to have done. So, a few extra months at the end does not seem to me to be a really big deal.
Okay, let me hear from other members of the council how they feel about this idea. So we haven't heard from, let's see, Dan has his hand raised. I want to ask you specifically, Dan, about the steps forward and what you would like to see, not specific issues about the plan, but how you would like to move forward.
Well, you were asking earlier about some ideas for a letter, and I think that what I have to say, I'm going to try to keep it down to about just 2 minutes or a minute. We've got a lot to learn from Frenchman's Creek intersection. A lot of bicycles are crossing now. A lot of pedestrians are crossing. I'm stuck in that traffic all the time. I see it in both directions. It's not uncommon that I see the light turned red on Highway 1 for 30 seconds while a bicycle, just buzzes on by, or even pedestrians takes 10 seconds to get across the road, but yet the light is red for another 20 seconds, holding up and just compounding the traffic problem in both directions. Having said that, I've always said the best solution is an underpass. A secondary solution would to start having discussions about, let's say, a motion sensor to where the signal for a pedestrian crossing is programmed to turn the red light on Highway 1 for only 10 seconds, because the majority of people are crossing. Now, if there's any lingering, I understand that it's set for 30 seconds for the slowest walker. But if there's the majority is crossing in 10 seconds or less. If there's any lingering walkers, the motion sensor could pick that up and.
You're not answering my question, really. I think we know that you care about underpasses, and this is very specific. I hear you.
In the letter.
But it seems like what I'm asking the council, the rest of the council, or several members of the council seem to be saying that they don't think that we're going to write a letter for the next meeting, that's not enough time. So there will be opportunity to talk about all of this if we go forward on that path. So do you agree, Dan, that we can't write a letter and be prepared in one more meeting to finalize our comments on this? And if so, would you be available in December or January for a study session?
Yes, I'll be available. My intention here was to kind of start the thinking process, because
I know, it's getting late and we still have one more topic. And if we're not gonna write a letter for the next meeting, then we'll have plenty of time later to talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to continue going around. Jill, what's your take on our path forward?
I'm in agreement with Dave. I would like more time spent on it, and I like the idea of a study session, and I am available.
Okay, thank you. Claire?
I agree that a study session is the way to go. I really am skeptical that we're going to come up with anything brand new. We've done this over and over. I don't think there's any new bombshells. I don't really see us needing more than one session. I have some constraints too. I'll be traveling a little bit. It may be hard for me to do it before the end of the year too, but I'm willing to try to work to see if we can find the time to do it, but I only want to do it once.
Okay. And of those, we still have to go to Lynn and Greg. But of those who have spoken, do you want to be involved in preparing the study session?
No.
Yeah. Len, let me go to you, because I know you've been very involved in Connect the Coast Side for a long time.
I'm willing to put in time to participate and organize a study session.
Okay. And when would you prefer to do it? December, January?
Well, Dave's been very absolute about it. I personally prefer to do it in the first Wednesday in December. Failing that, you're left with use the meeting on the 9th in January to do it.
9th.
To be specific.
The 9th is a Sunday. You mean the 12th?
Whatever the first. Basically,
so we have December 8th. You're talking about January 12th.
Yeah, well, either I think it's too early probably to do it in the first week of January relative to a lot of holiday schedules.
Yeah.
But
so replacing our regular meeting.
Yeah, and then push the regular meeting out to that next week.
Okay. For me, happy to go with what the majority of the council wants to do. It definitely sounds like we need more discussion on this. I can be flexible in adding another meeting in December and being prepared by that time. But it's, it sounds like at least one member of the council is going to not be ready, maybe two. So, yeah, Shonda, I would say, like, if we pushed, any comments, we would have a study session probably in January, sometime probably the 12th would be a likely date. I won't be chair anymore, so I'll work with Claire, the next chair, to figure this out. But we would have to have a study session, then we'd have to compile feedback from that, and then write a letter and vote on that letter at a future meeting. So that's probably looking like by the end of January, we could get feedback, which wouldn't be in time for your current schedule to send to do the planning commission meeting in January. What do you think about us, pushing that timeline back so you could present to the planning commission, let's say in February?
I'll just need to talk to our leadership about it. I think if that's the schedule you guys can do, then that's the schedule you can do. I think we would probably want to wait until your feedback before going to the commission, but not too much longer. So yeah.
Understood.
But I think, certainly your feedback would come before we would go to the board. So yeah, I'll talk to our leadership and.
Okay. Len, you have your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just hadn't taken it down.
Oh, okay. Claire, you had your hand up too.
Just commenting on the scheduling. If we did it the study session, the first week or two of January, that's a long time without a regular MCC meeting. That's like 6 weeks or more. And I don't think that's a good plan at all. I know that Dave, you don't feel like you have the time to put into this before the end of December. And I do think that your input is important, but I wonder if we could still put together something for later in December as a study session and have you contribute to it, even if you're not leading it. That seems like it would work better than early January.
If that was the only way to do it, I could probably do it, but I know I will not be doing a good job on it. And after all this time, that bothers me.
Then I think the only other option is to do it in the end of January.
Could we not do a regular meeting, but have this as the only item?
We could do that.
Yeah.
Or we get a regular updates but then this, like, no other agenda items, just this one.
We could, I mean, who knows what's going to happen between December 10th.
Yeah.
But in theory, yeah.
The other thing is we can call a special meeting if we have to. I agree, 6 weeks without a regular council meeting is a long time. And, maybe I'm wrong that this is going to be a long study session. So we might be able to fit a regular agenda item in as well if it's not a big one. If it's a big one, then we would probably have to schedule an extra meeting in January on top and then that would probably mean pushing the retreat to February, which I've always hated doing, but we have done in the past.
Okay, so I think I hear what everyone's opinion is on this. It sounds like probably not having this on the December agenda because people need more time to digest this. But I don't want, I want to make sure that we're prepared. I only really have so far Len wanting to lead the study session, but I think, it'd be very beneficial for 2 other people to contribite to the planning of it and to at least share their ideas.
I'm willing to be involved in the planning of it.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, well, at least the 2 of you, that, and probably we'll see, like with the timing, either Claire or I. Okay, so let's do that. We're going to close out this item for tonight. Thank you so much, Chanda and Katie, for coming and presenting and staying so late. I definitely, we really appreciate all the hard work that you've done on this plan. And I hope you understand that we just want to make sure that we close it out with all of our feedback captured.
Yes, thank you very much.
Could I ask Katie
you.
and Shonda really quickly, when is the last time the public could make a comment directly to, and is Joe Leclerc is gone, who replaced him? Who do we send it to? If there's a deadline. That was for Katie or Chandra.
Yeah, you can send comments to either me or Chanda. That's fine. I mean, we haven't set a deadline for public comments. We were hoping that this is a pretty final draft, but it might depend on the comment.
And who replaced Joe Leclerc?
Melissa Ross.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item 5C this week, which is the MCC website. Len?
I would like to make a motion that we push this out to a later meeting unless Len thinks it's short and urgent.
This is just a 2-minute item regardless.
Oh, forget it. Go ahead.
Okay. Are we starting this item, Michelle?
Go ahead, Len.
Okay. As we all know, Lisa had, with commendable effort, moved our website to Squarespace 7. I think she continues to passion work on it. But basically, I think at this point, we have a need to understand going into 2022, what are functional objectives for improvement or change of the website? And so what I propose to do is to solicit comments from all council members, either write them to me or I'll track you down to get a list of what do people think are issues that should be considered to enhance this. This is not it's not a technical discussion. For example, for myself, just as an example, working on the wildfire resiliency project that's underway, I've been asking myself, how can we have something in the website that keeps track of a consulting process that has numerous touch points with the community to keep people abreast as well as point information coming in. And I think that's something that we could do. But the bottom line is to reach out to council members in advance of the retreat in 2022 so that I can bring to it, this is a list of considerations people have for functional enhancements to the website. And so that's my pitch there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Len?
It would help, Len, if you could give a couple examples of the kind of thing you're thinking of.
Well, for example, let's take the 2 things from our meeting today. We had public comment, the request on the plastics raised the issue of for really global issues like that, but things that may have local interest. What might we do that's effective within the framework of our website other than links to other places, or are there for that one? In the case of the wildfire resiliency consulting effort that's underway, they've already identified 3 different times that they're going to meet with a committee from MCC as well as other people to get a report back from the consultant. I think we've, at the beginning of this meeting, talked about additional ways to receive public comment. And I was looking to, on the website, just to start it up, on a web page for it, identify several things that have already been assembled by ourselves that are important to it. The question is how to make it active and useful in this regard, and fit it into the current framework. furthermore, on SR1, the opening questions I gave to the people from planning was really, if you look at Highway 1 with what they refer to as the SHOP project, they're asking for, really by next March, ideas or input on that effort. And that's one that it really is not in the framework of a long-term project, but this will really be a major effort. So how do we begin to bring things together for that in a useful way? And lots of times it's not the long-range planners, it's, let's say, DPW and other county departments have a role there. So how do you begin to bring those on a focus? So I've identified, let's say, 5 different things that we'd like to have considered as they do this project. And those are the kind of things that I'm figuring out, how do we use the website to help further that process. But, you know, it's so that's basically open to bring in anything and then have it put together so that, for example, I know that some members are concerned about how do we put in good order our 30-year history of documents, which have been assembled, but is there a better way to treat it for long-term access? And it both is a way to separate it for searching, but not have it get in the way of trying to understand what are our current priorities. So anyway, that's.
Okay. Does that, any other questions for Lynn?
Okay.
Okay. Then we'll close out that item. All right, we're going to move on to item 6, which is council activity. Who wants to go first? Okay, Greg.
I'll just quickly mention separately, Dan and I each happened to take some hikes through Quarry Park and inspect the work. I would comment only that I can understand the concerns of the Upper Elgrenod Boulevard neighbors in seeing how many trees remain above the pond. I would also comment that I've been doing some research on the electrification of housing. And I'll just say that the more I've dug into this, the worse it's looked. It's going to raise costs of housing, and it's not clear that the benefits that are intended. So I know Half Moon Bay's got a big push behind this. I understand it's coming for the county. I attended a seminar at Rutgers today, and I just think we need to consider whether we're adopting the right policy to do the greatest good. Finally, it's Sam. I have no news on the lawsuit, but Pacifica just had a 3 million gallon sewer spill. And I'm expecting that the Regional Water Quality Control Board is going to start getting more serious, in part because of that. And Sam, due to Half Moon Bay, has again delayed the imposition of a non-domestic wastewater control policy. They have not discussed any cost reimbursement for the $1 million or $2 million that's been wasted to residents who are not at fault. And I just want to warn you all that I think there's potential for regulatory intervention, not only in Pacifica, but at SAM, because of the fact that SAM board can't agree on moving forward with a program to measure the pollutants that are coming in. That's it.
Thank you, Greg. Next, I'll go to Dave.
Finding my Zoom, sorry. Okay, so a couple things. I had sent something out to the council probably a month or 2 ago about a 30 by 30 oceans conference run through UC Irvine, sponsored by Coastal Quest. That was 4.5 hours yesterday and the day before. I attended about half of that. It was quite a bit about strategies and mechanisms and successes and failures on dealing with sea level rise and problems with the oceans and creating new marine protected areas and everything else. A good resort. the videos and materials will be up on the Coastal Quest site sometime in the next few weeks. I don't expect anybody to go watch 9 hours of video, but it's a good resource to know about. I also watched the supervisors meeting for the dog off leash policy and the redistricting meetings. And I think Lena pretty much covered the redistricting stuff. They did ask the analysts to look at the quote unquote minimal change map again. Nobody liked the name of it for some reason, but and then there were 4 maps that got submitted but were not published, and they asked the commission to go back and look at those again. So they'll probably do that and read back the first meeting of the Board of Supervisors, so they won't be right at the last moment. But there were a lot of people who spoke on the 2 preferred alternatives that were recommended. People were very passionate on both for a lot of reasons. And I won't go into that any further, but there will be yet another chance to have input. So if you really care about that issue, watch the agendas and the webpage. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Dave. If anyone else wants to speak, please raise your hand. I'll give a quick update. As I mentioned in a previous meeting, Claire and I had a meeting with the county health people who are doing the COVID data on vaccination rates. And we had, as we had suspected, there was a big discrepancy between what we thought the vaccination rate should be on the Midcoast and what was actually being reported. And so out of that initial discussion, they went back and did some more research and followed up. And it turns out that there were almost 1,000 vaccinated people in areas of the Midcoast that weren't being counted. And those are mostly people in areas that didn't fall within Montera, Moss Beach, or El Granada definition. So places like Seal Cove, where I live, was not in Moss Beach, according to the maps that the county was using. And so when they went back and did that calculation, and as was one of the ideas that Supervisor Horsley had, was to combine everyone into a Midcoast district, so that is one of the easiest ways to resolve the discrepancy. But it turns out that our vaccination rate is 85% for the Midcoast. And so hopefully that will be published on the website soon. I haven't checked it recently, but I think they're kind of waiting for a final sign off by us that the calculations work. But I'm just really happy to report that, because there was this perception and even this news article that came out about how people in the Midcoast are just independent and they don't like, and we thought that was wrong. And it turns out that was wrong, that we did, that we're not like people who are not getting vaccinated. We are in fact vaccinated. 85% of adults, or those eligible, I believe it's like 10 and over. Obviously that'll change now that 5-year-olds and up can get it, but I'm very happy to report that. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised for council activity, so we'll move on to future agendas. So as I mentioned before, traditionally we cancel the second meeting in November, and I plan to do that. I'll put a post up on the website. I did have the Connect the Coastside letter for December 10th, but it sounds like we will not have that. We will have officer elections. So every first meeting in December, we elect officers for the following year. So I'll just point that out. I also potentially, it was mentioned earlier by, I think Lena, about the Coastside Recovery Initiative. And they are presenting to Half Moon Bay City Council, I think this coming week. We had wanted to have them on our agenda too, but we're just waiting. They wanted to present to Half Moon Bay first. So there's a possibility that we will have them at the December 10th meeting. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to add to that meeting?
At the first of this meeting, you, in response to the public, talked about having a way for people to speak to Panorama directly, like attend an MCC meeting in which people could voice comments. So the December meeting might be a good place for that.
Possibly. I have to connect with Sheena and Kellex on the timeline and see if we would be ready. It's really up to Panorama.
I think this is separate from the other ones where they're coming to give us updates at 3 different milestone points. So I think we want to get that type of meeting as early as possible. That is
agreed. I'll follow up.
See what they say.
That's a good idea. Mm-hmm. Greg?
I'll point out it's December 8th, not December 10th, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. I have that date wrong. Okay, December 8th.
Okay.
I hate to bring it up, but there's been an increasing level of concern with noise at Half Moon Bay Airport. And I know some of you have been around forever and, felt that couldn't be dealt with. I have an article coming out tomorrow. I've got 20 residents expressing concern and are willing to be identified in public. And they would like it on the agenda. And I think they're going to want some kind of 2-meeting session, probably one with the manager there, Half Moon Bay Airport. And I have another suggestion in the article. So I know what we just discussed. We're giving priority to connect the coast side. But I'm telling you, there are a lot of people upset about the noise from Half Moon Bay Airport.
So you're looking to broker a meeting between these people and the manager of the airport?
Well, I was thinking the MCC should, not I personally.
Well, you could do it, but this isn't coming to a meeting. They want to talk to the airport manager. Is that right?
I think they want their concerns heard and forwarded to the county for correction.
Well, put some effort into what you can do.
I'm not sure what that means.
Well, I know, it's an effort that's been looked at various ways. So
You represent us. Why can't you put it on the agenda?
You can. We're just looking for a place to do it. So
okay.
We want to just be most, I'm happy to put that on the agenda. I will first ask you this, Greg, did any of your comments really, is it purely noise that is the concern, or is the lead issue part of it?
The lead pollution issue is an issue, and so is safety in general. There's specific requests for measuring lead around the airport in the soil and the food grown, testing the water, although we may find Montero Water Sanitary District has done that. I'm not sure. What they have for lead testing that I found didn't specifically target the airport wells.
Okay. I'm interested in the lead issue, not so much the noise issue. So maybe interested in working with you on that. But I agree that we need to figure out what the next step is. Yes, of course, having people's voices heard is important, but what can we actually do about it? Who do we go to? Those who have been on the council longer than me, I know this issue has come up before. I would actually appreciate any suggestions for next steps, like for who. I've heard, I think Dave say before that FAA that is responsible. For setting the rules.
And they severely limit what the county can control short of shutting the airport down. If the first thing to do is go talk to the person in DPW that deals with the airports. I believe the contact information is on our website. If not, I'll come up with it and find out what they believe they can and cannot do and what their experience was with San Carlos when they tried to control the noise there, because that's the starting point.
Well, that is in fact covered in the article. That's covered in the article.
Okay, but you don't necessarily have to accept what they say, but that's the starting point.
One of the recommendations of the citizenry is adopt the policies that San Carlos already has adopted.
That made all the residents under the San Carlos flight path very unhappy. It was not sufficient for them, so I don't think it's going to help.
Can you guys
Okay,
just
so,
get Gretchen Kelly out here instead of you guys deciding for us? Either that or let the citizens be represented by somebody else.
It needs to
No,
be done by a council member first before the meeting. Otherwise, the meeting will not be very productive.
I'm also uncomfortable with it being based on a BuzzFeed article. I'd really rather keep this discussion in-house.
Okay, so
Okay,
Claire and Greg could work on
No, well,
I'm interested in working on it. It would be great to have a third person.
Yeah, and I would also suggest that somebody contact the County of Santa Clara airport manager for Reed Hillview for the lead data and the proposal to get rid of leaded gas for airplanes at Reed Hillview so that we have some data for that.
Okay. Okay, so Greg and I, anyone else?
it. Sounds good.
Okay. I'm not promising it's going to be on December 8th. We'll see what other things shake out with Panorama and stuff. But yeah, it will be, hopefully we can get it on a future meeting. So Greg and I will meet offline about that. Dan, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate for the next meeting, but I just want to keep it on the radar that I do believe that we should have an agenda item to discuss the MCC funding, having measurements done at the El Granada fire station for the light that's leaving the property, for all the reasons that I gave last meeting.
Okay, Claire?
I think following up with what Dan just said, I think last meeting we decided, or it was mentioned, that what we should do is talk to county council about the best approach to the lighting situation, because my feeling is if we get it measured, then what do we do? If nobody wants to hear it, how do we make them listen to us? I think getting a legal opinion before we do anything else is a good idea. I also am interested eventually, not right now, in putting more effort into making sure that people stop driving off the highway up near Double Slide. That's something I would like to do down the road. And maybe Len would be willing to help with that.
Well, I will note, Claire, that there was a proposal, not a proposal, but a preliminary meeting that Len and I took part in with Caltrans that includes it's a barrier project. It's actually posted on our website. They plan on putting a safety barrier all the way from basically almost to the tunnel to Montera. It won't be until like 2025, I believe, that it will be in place, but it is I believe, funded and planned.
So I think with the most recent event, we would want to see if they can put a temporary set of K-rails there. I mean, that would be the only other thing that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't even know exactly where there's a bunch of K-rail there. I don't know exactly where that recent, the person who left the highway last week went off. I feel like there's several different locations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, why don't you two work together offline about that and see if we can just contact, because they did that before with, I believe, some prompting by us without us having to write a letter or take official action. So maybe there's something we can do.
That's for Claire and me to follow up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Does that mean we're ready to adjourn?
I think so. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I second.
Okay. Dave, please call the roll.
Oh.
Dan.
Yes.
Len.
Yes.
Claire.
Yes.
Jill.
Yes.
Greg.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
And I'm yes. We are adjourned at 10:30. Thank you.
Good boy.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Good night.